And we should be live in both locations. Let's just make sure that this is the way we want it to be. Howdy, howdy. Oops, I forgot my water bottle. I should go get that. Where have I been? I was in New Zealand. And then I was sick. But I'm back. Should be... Oh, no audio. This is fixable. This is fixable. I'm aware. I know. I know. Testing, testing. We'll just do this. How about that? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me at all? Sorry, we're just getting things set up, so let me just finish and then I'll see if I can fix the audio. Although this isn't ideal audio. I think it's coming from my webcam rather than from my face, and it's also probably delayed. So I don't know why I'm not able to feed the audio through from my other source, but we'll try to fix it in just a moment. It is a webcam. It is coming from a webcam, yes. Which is not good, so I'm going to try to fix that in just a second. I just got to finish setting up everything else. Let's crank that volume too. Okay, how that's probably good on YouTube. What are your thoughts on Alex Connor? I generally like him. I think that he does a good job. Now, the question is, why isn't my virtual camera passing through the audio from... Oh, RC's here. Okay, let's just bring up RC. We'll just get on with it. RC, how's it going?
Hello.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Sweet. What's up? What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, so from an atheist point of view, what is the role and function of humans?
What is the role and function? In what scope?
Like B's role and
universal
function is...
scope, or...
Well, we can see the role and function of many species on the planet bringing balance to the life cycle.
We can see the role and... So, like, when you say role and function, do you just mean, like, in the context of... Like, in what context? What, like... Because, like...
Would you say that's
a
honeybees serve
that
a function?
Would I say that humans serve a function?
No. Would you say that honeybees serve a function?
I mean, we can, like, ascribe a function to them, I guess.
Well, without honeybees, what would happen?
Things would probably die, and I imagine other things would live, and...
I mean, many plants that are requiring on the labor, let's say, of bees, honeybees, to pollinate them. So
yeah. A lot of plants would die. I'm sure that other plants would thrive. The world would be different.
The world would be vastly different. So
yeah,
for the world that we have today, right, you can ascribe a role and function by observation in nature of what different species do to keeping balance to the life cycle.
Yeah, if you want to make that, like, if you want to ascribe function in that regard, sure.
Do you not agree with that, though, that there are different species that provide a function and role?
It seems like you're assigning, like, agency or, like, intent, where the contention is that I'm not sure if there is intent. By the way, is my volume a little bit better?
I can hear you fine. I don't know if the chat hears you any differently than me.
Let me try adjusting really quick. Maybe that's better now. Yeah, maybe. Oh no, that's not gonna. How about? Okay. Anyway, I think we're okay. Yeah. So I think that, like, by saying, like, there's some, like, role and function, the... Oh.
Huh?
Okay,
Yeah, I can hear you.
sorry, I just disconnected for a sec. By saying that there's some role and function, it kind of sounds like you're trying to ascribe some sort of like intent, and like if you're trying to do that, then like obviously I'm going to disagree with you just on like the fact that I'm an atheist. But like if you're trying to say that like yeah, we can see that the honeybees act as they perform this process in this environment, then sure, I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying intent because from your worldview, there can't be an intention since there's no mind that created anything.
Yeah.
So, based off the millions of years, billions of years of evolution leading to the point of life the way it is today, there's a clear reason that honeybees do what they do. Evolutionarily speaking, there is a clear reason for it. There's a clear reason that we can outline
Well,
for most
hold on.
species on the planet.
That's not really correct, right? Honeybees don't care about plants. They don't care about maintaining the ecosystem. They just do what happens to be effective for them. That's what evolution cares about here. So evolutionarily, they don't perform a function. They just have a survival mechanism, right?
I don't think honeybees are going around thinking that this is what we need to do to keep a balance to the life cycle on Earth. I'm not claiming that.
Sure.
Honeybees do what they do for their survival.
Mm-hmm.
And from your worldview, right? So they evolved to this point, and there's a clear, you can observe it, and we can arrive at a very clear conclusion. This is why honeybees are doing what they're doing. And this is how it brings a balance to the life cycle. This is, in this part of the environment, this is what's happening. We can observe that.
I think you're still going to get some pushback from me because you said that we can observe that why honeybees are doing what they're doing. But why they're doing what they're doing is based off of, like instincts, genetic coding, and, millions of years of evolution. They're not doing it for any other reason than that.
I agree with you. I'm not saying they're doing it for any... They're doing it...
Then yeah, we're in agreement.
Okay, so then why... So we see what honeybees are doing, the point that they evolved to, and we understand why it is that they're doing it.
Yep.
Why do humans do what they're doing, what we're doing, and what is the purpose? Not purpose, because I know that requires intent, but what is it that humans do to bring a balance to the life cycle on Earth?
I mean, we don't really.
So
that's not quite true. That's not quite true. Like there are certain populations, for example, that if we didn't exist, cattle would probably be extinct. So like in some sense, like we are one of the larger reasons why there are large mammals that still exist. Like lots of large mammals, but like yeah, generally we're not like we're not like some keystone species that like is required for the functionality of some like large ecosystem.
Right. So humans actually, if we're looking at this from a balance of life, humans displace things more than anything. We cause more harm than anything.
Sure.
So Earth would be better without humans.
I mean, depends on what you mean by better. Like, I happen to value humans. I care about humans generally, perhaps for selfish reasons. And so I kind of like the idea of humans being around.
I understand that you can selfishly, subjectively like that idea. Of course, you're a human. But parasites also don't want to be unalive necessarily. But I'm just saying that we cause more harm than anything, humans, and life on Earth would be more beneficial without humans here, from your point of view.
When you say more beneficial, you mean something like there would be more non-human life flourishing on Earth?
Well, there would be, for example, there wouldn't be animal farms that cows and chickens are being slaughtered in mass.
Yeah, I agree. That would be true. There wouldn't be those.
Okay, there wouldn't be fossil fuels.
Agreed. I agree. With regards to like the other organisms on Earth, it may very well be better if humans didn't exist. Sure.
Yeah, and just to the atmosphere of Earth and no matter how you look at it, without humans, things would be better.
Things would be better for other organisms on Earth, perhaps.
Correct. So that
as in there would be more of them or something.
Yeah, and they wouldn't be suffering as much without humans.
That maybe. It's hard to say. Like the natural world is also pretty like gruesome, right? Like humans also create a lot of suffering. But so it would be hard to quantify that. But I mean, okay, let's just grant it's true. Sure.
Okay, so what we're doing is intentional. What they're doing, they just naturally evolved to do. Are you saying that humans naturally evolved to just slaughter and pollute the environment and to hurt the life
No, I
around
never
us?
said that.
Okay, so then what is it that humans evolved to do? What is our
We evolved to
role?
survive, just like everything else.
We evolved just to survive.
That's what everything evolves to do.
But our
Well,
survival
to survive and
is at the-
reproduce, right?
correct. So our survival is at the detriment of everything else around us.
Yes.
Though.
Yep. That's
So-
actually true of everything's survival, by the way.
No, bees'
Until-
survival is not to
well,
the detriment of everything around.
It was to the detriment of literally all of the other bees that didn't have that trait, right? It's called
That's just
survival
natural
of the
selection,
fittest.
though.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's not to their detriment.
I mean, if
They
the
just didn't
other
survive.
species go extinct, that's kind of detrimental, isn't it?
No.
Going
No, because
extinct
they're
isn't
not-
detrimental to a population.
Well, they're just weaker, though.
That
I mean,
that's detriment. If under any definition of detrimental, going extinct is a pretty solid example.
so what is it that you mean by detrimental then? Maybe we don't.
I just mean it
agree.
negatively affects the population.
But it didn't though, because the
Extinction
stronger-
negatively affects populations.
It negatively affects a population.
Yeah, because it eliminates the population.
It
That's like
eliminates the
worst thing
weaker
that can
side of
happen to the
population.
Well, no. If there were competitive, like alternative species that were in the same niche, and they were being competed against, then that alternate species, like it's not just like some weaker part of the population. It's like a separate population of a different type of animal that, lo and behold, went extinct, right?
It did go extinct, right? And that's actually better for life on Earth because you had the stronger species survive.
I don't know what you mean
That's
by better
natural
for life
selection.
on Earth.
I don't.
You can. So
survive.
that's absolutely what happens. I don't know how you can say that that's better.
Because an inferior species that's dying off is not something you want to populate the Earth with. You want the strongest to survive, right?
I mean, I don't know why you're making like normative claims here. Like, why you would want it to be a certain way? Like, I don't.
Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right. I'm not going to make a normative claim. I'm just saying that the reality is, observing nature, the strongest survive, the weakest
Yeah,
die off. That's not
that's just
negative, nor is it positive. It just is.
Yep, it's just a fact of the matter. Yeah, I agree.
All right, so let's not ascribe negative or positive to it. It just is.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is it that humans are doing here on Earth? Billions of years of
We're
evolution
surviving.
led
We're
to
surviving
the
and
most-
reproducing.
Just
like
surviving
everything
and
else.
reproducing.
Just like everything else.
But the everything else is not detrimental to the life around them. It's
Well,
not.
some things.
We are.
So again, some things are damaging to the things that they interact with. Some things aren't. Like the example that you gave are parasites. Plenty of parasites exist. These are not particularly like useful animals. Like they're like 500,000 species of parasitic wasps or something like that. And the only thing they do is they basically go find some insect, and then they lay eggs inside that insect, and then their eggs eat the insect from the inside out. That's their whole thing. That's all they do, right?
Right. I agree
mean, like,
with you.
they're not really like benefiting the ecosystem.
Okay, so human beings, our role then would be just to survive and reproduce.
Oh, so when you say role, it sounds like you're trying to impose like some sort of structure here. Like all any living thing does is survive and if it's successful, is survive and reproduce. Now, sometimes that survival and reproduction helps other organisms also survive and reproduce in the form of symbiosis, right? Like honeybees. Other organisms are parasitic, so they actually take advantage of other organisms to more effectively survive and reproduce. Other organisms are, like they're photosynthesizers, so they actually produce resources for others, but don't consume any resources from others. So, like, there's a whole bunch of different survival strategies. Humans happen to be, predatory, which means that we don't really help other species survive. We kind of take advantage of other species already surviving.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. So I'm just saying that billions of years of evolution led to the point of the most intelligent species, humans, existing on Earth. And That just is. We just survive and we reproduce. That's just what humans do. That's what every organism on Earth does.
Yeah.
So what's the purpose of us? How do we find purpose as humans then?
Well, I don't know how you find purpose. I assume you find purpose through faith. I find purpose through the things that I care about. I don't know if there's some grand human purpose. I suspect there's probably not. But I think that people can ascribe purpose to their life in however way they want. Like, you know, if their purpose is to take care of their family, that's fine.
No, because we have boundaries of what is acceptable or not acceptable. So not just whatever you want. You do have some ethical lines you have to draw in the sand.
Well, I mean, people can like value whatever they want. Now, whether or not the rest of us think that they should value that is a different question. But like, you know, it's like, a person's purpose, the way I see it, is for them to decide.
Another question about the humans. I'm curious what your answer to this would be. What did a male human evolve first or a female human evolve first?
It's not really the right question, because there wasn't like a first human, right? In the sense that there was never like a point in time where you could say, aha, that's definitely a human, and anything before that definitely wasn't a human, and everything after that definitely was. It's like a gradient, right? And there's not like some sharp cutoff. You could definitely say that on one side you're definitely human, and on the other far side you're definitely not human. But in the middle, it's very, very blurry, and there's not like some hard cutoff. So it's not really a sensible thing to talk about.
It's not a sensible thing to talk about. Well, you could even go to then whatever was pre-human that we evolved from. Then how do you get male first or female? Something.
Oh, you're asking how did sex evolve?
Sure.
Like
if
in
you
general.
Want to make it more. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I'm not a biologist, so take this with a grain of salt. But my understanding is that it basically evolved as a way of mixing genes. So like this is even a thing that exists in like microorganisms, where you basically have. Let me give an analogy. You know how like civilization kind of developed because people specialized. So like you have the farmers who are good at farming, and the writers who are good at writing, and the soldiers who are good at soldiering, and so on. And that allowed for like more rapid advancement. So the idea is that simple organisms, like simple single-celled organisms, they can actually exchange genetic material. At least some of them can, by basically just shooting DNA at each other. And this is like a completely asexual thing. They just like shoot DNA, and then it goes into the other one, and then they mix their genes together, and now they have diversity of the gene pool, which is generally a good thing for, essentially for genetic success. And so this kind of like shooting of DNA basically just became a specialized thing. It became more useful to have some of the population be very, very good at shooting the DNA, and some of the population be very, very good at receiving the DNA. And that's sex. That's all sex is, right?
Sorry, I was getting a call.
You're good.
I heard everything you said. Yeah, I mean, I hear you. That's definitely a belief, though. It's not...
I mean, look, if you don't believe me, and if you don't want to, that's totally fine, because, I'm not a biologist. Like, the evolution of sex is, like, something that's pretty well studied, so...
Yeah, I don't deny that
read about.
Yeah, I'll do more of a deep dive into the evolution of sex. I'm hearing your argument. I'm just saying that it's definitely built around certain assumptions, and that's a belief system.
What assumptions?
Well, first of all, assuming that there isn't a creator that just created male and female and different kinds of species on Earth. That's an assumption number one. And then assumption number two, that it was beneficial for some species to kind of offshoot into having male and female, and other species like being hermaphroditic. For example, like there are certain species of snails that are hermaphroditic.
Mm-hmm.
It's a baseline assumption that there wasn't a creator that just created male, female in some, and then hermaphrodites in others.
Well, I mean, look, you asked what the explanation for how this evolved was, so I gave you the explanation for how it evolved. If you don't think that evolution is a thing in the first place, I don't like. That's on you, I guess.
Well, I do believe in microevolution and that, I mean, adaptation. I don't believe that humans' ancestors were algae. I don't think that that's a common ancestor of human beings. No. That we all started as, all life on Earth started as a single-celled organism and then just evolved for billions of years into all the life we have around us. I think that that's just ludicrous.
Have we had the conversation about what a kind is?
No, we haven't.
So, what do you think a kind is?
I mean, that's skipping a lot of steps, though. I'm just telling you that the kind of evolution I don't accept.
No, I know, but the trouble with kind of this like arbitrary delineation between micro and macro evolution, which by the way is apparently like basically just a thing that it's like an apologetics thing. It's not really like a scientific thing. That the distinction arises from believing that things can evolve within their own kind and things cannot evolve across kinds. But in order to even make sense of that distinction, you have to have some sort of notion of what a kind is.
Yeah, I mean, then, for example, canines is a kind. Canines are not felines. Felines are a different kind.
So are we talking about like genus or?
I think. I'm not 100% sure if it's genus. I'm just saying that there are clear, distinct kinds. So like a canine is a kind.
So is a weasel the same kind as like an otter?
I don't know. But I'm sticking to canine because I know that one specifically. I don't know the specificities of an otter.
Is a fox the same kind as a dog?
I don't know.
Because they're both canines. They're both in the Canidae family.
And insofar as canine, if they're both part of the canine kind, then yes.
Well, that's what I'm asking. I'm asking. Well, so they're not in the same genus. They're in the Canidae family, and so they are. They're closely related to, dogs, and they're also, obviously foxes. So like,
Okay, let's go to humans, which is more clear and concise. Humans are a kind. Humans are not any of the other species on the earth, and it's a clear distinction between humans and every other species.
So that's great, and I guess it's quite nice that like there's only one hominid species. Actually, no, there's not. There's only one hominid species that currently exists. But there definitely were different hominid species, and we have fossils of these things. So would those have been the same kind? Oh no, I'm sorry. Hominids include chimpanzees. I'm thinking of the Homo genus. So there were other members of the Homo genus.
Right. So what's the overarching point you're trying to get at? Because no, I don't believe that humans started out as a single-celled organism, just like every other life on Earth. I don't believe that.
The point I'm trying to get at is that you don't actually have a theory, or even like a conception of a theory of what a kind is. It's just vibes based, which is why like the idea is like ill-founded to begin with. Because your notion
it's ill-founded to begin with.
Well, yeah. So you have this position that like, yes, I believe in microevolution, but you can't even tell me what the bounds of microevolution are.
Like the different beak sizes of finches on the Galapagos Islands.
Yeah. So could a dog evolve into a fox? That's a question that your worldview should be able to answer.
Well, can a dog and a fox reproduce?
I don't think so.
Then they're not the same kind.
Okay, so you use species, the species limit, or the species definition for kind.
From the limited knowledge that I have of it so far, that makes more sense to me. I may change my mind, but if acquiring more knowledge on it, but yeah, that makes more sense. Species can only reproduce amongst their own species.
Okay, so then you would say that like that chimpanzees and bonobos are different kinds.
Yeah, if they can't reproduce.
And you would say that like I don't know, that like mountain lions and tigers are not the same kind.
I'm not even 100% sure if they can't reproduce, but yeah, that's just
they're too there's too big of a size differential.
Okay, then sure.
But they're definitely both cats, right?
Okay. Like I still don't. So sure, maybe I'm wrong about that. Now, why am I supposed to believe that we all evolved from a single celled organism?
I
I mean,
mean, the
that's the
genetic
central
evidence
question.
seems to suggest that.
The genetic evidence seems to suggest. So why couldn't they just reproduce this in a laboratory? If they could do that, trust me, I change a lot of my worldview.
Reproduce what? The genetic
Reproduce,
evidence or
no,
what?
life coming from inorganic material.
That's a completely separate question.
That's abio.
Abiogenesis and evolution are like related but completely separate topics.
If you accept evolution and you deny God, then the creation of life is abiogenesis, or not the creation, but the
The
inception
origins
of
of
life
life,
is abiogenesis.
sure, but you deny evolution to begin with. There are plenty
No,
of Christians who no, come on. You deny evolution in the like academic scientific scholarly sense. You
oh,
absolutely do.
that like we came from algae? Yeah, that's ridiculous. Of course I deny that.
Right, and the genetic evidence for that is pretty outstanding, right?
No, it is not pretty outstanding at all. To try to connect the dots from, the first multicellular life to human beings as though that's our common ancestor is not outstanding at all.
I mean, how would you? So you're familiar with like how paternity tests work, yeah?
More or less.
I mean, like basically they do a genetic test and then they see how similar you are to how similar the adult is to the child, and if they're sufficiently similar, then they say, "Aha, you're related. You must be the father," right?
Sure. So you're saying there are similarities between us and like plants or something.
Yeah, the way that we establish familial relations, is by genetic testing. It's good enough for a court. I don't know why it wouldn't be good enough for scientific evidence.
Okay, so let's just say I accept that worldview. Let's say I accept that, we have all the same common ancestor because we all started from hydrothermal vents. That's where life originated. And then it evolved to the point that it's at now. Why would anything be wrong or right? If that's true,
Why would
there's no
anything
God.
be wrong or right?
Yeah.
Are you asking like in an objective sense?
Well, I
Because
don't. You can't have an objective sense.
yeah,
if there's no God.
I'm not a moral realist, so.
Right. So then everything's subjective,
Mhm.
and there's no. To the first question I asked, there's no clear role for humans,
Mhm.
and we just exist to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's a pretty suicidal like worldview to adopt.
I mean, I have that worldview, and I don't feel like I want to unalive myself, so
I'm
kind
glad
of
that you
disagree.
don't, but the suicide rate went up astronomically, sorry, after 1962 in the United States. Once we ripped prayer out of the public school system, and we radically changed the Overton window away from a Christian foundation.
Okay, I can just believe you, I guess. I don't really care though. I have a feeling that that's probably not the cause. For what it's worth, I don't even know if that's true. But if we just grant that the suicide rate did like spike or whatever, to say that that must have been the cause is kind of like an enormous leap, right?
No, I wouldn't say that because before that time, when basically every culture, every society accepted that there's some kind of God, and our society accepted the Christian God, and you radically change away from what humans have accepted forever, and you bring in atheism and this like arbitrary notion of morality, then yeah, things change radically. I wouldn't say that that's a stretch to say that that has devastating consequences.
By the way, I just gotta check this. The suicide rates didn't spike in 1962.
I didn't say they spiked in 1962.
They didn't even increase in 1962. They were actually like down to like it was around 12.5 in 1962. It was like 13 in like 1980. In 2000 it was like 8 or like 11. So like it's actually been basically stagnant since like the mid 40s.
I'm saying that 1962 they ripped prayer out of the public school system.
And that seems to have had no influence on suicidality.
Suicide rate has increased for men astronomically after
I'm
into
looking
the
at
2000s, 2010s, 2020s.
I'm looking at the
I didn't
total
say in
rate.
the year.
I'm just looking at the total rate. Like if you want to say for men, maybe I'd have to see data on that. But like it just really hasn't changed since like the 40s.
The amount of women on antidepressants now is higher than it's ever been. I mean,
We're
there's a
also
lot
better.
of different factors.
Yeah, I agree to say that yes, that must be because we stopped forcing children to pray in school. Is kind of a crazy thing to say though. Like,
It's
is
not
there any evidence for
forcing.
that, or is it
No,
just vibes?
it's when in society is accepting that there is a moral standard, that we do have a creator, and you reject that and you push away everything we've ever learned about that and say, hey, by the way, there is no real role to you. You just survive, and there is no God. Yeah, you're gonna have devastating consequences to that.
Yeah. So, is there anything more that you can say about like the actual causation here, or is this just vibes based?
Well, of course, because once you rip God away, you rip the purpose of humans away.
I'm asking for evidence that this is like something that actually caused the increase in antidepressant usage that we see today.
Yeah, when people don't feel they have a purpose, they get more
You're
depressed.
just saying it again. I'm asking for evidence of this claim. Evidence
You don't
of
think
this relationship between the
So
two.
are you rejecting that when people don't have purpose, depression levels go up? You deny that?
Am I rejecting when people don't have purpose, depression levels go up? I don't even know if that's something that's been studied. So yeah, I would like to see it like
Yeah,
data that
I
supports that
would
position.
argue that when people don't have purpose, they're higher. They have much more likely to be depressed.
That's maybe true, maybe not. I would like to see evidence for the claim. But
Come on.
let's RC, let's just grant that that's true, just for the sake of argument. That says nothing about whether God exists, right?
No, but it's evidence pointing towards that believing in this has a positive outcome. So
So
how do
I
we?
agree that for some people, belief in a higher power absolutely can be beneficial for them. It can absolutely improve their mental health or whatever. I absolutely agree that can be super useful for some people. Again, I don't really care about that though. I care about
You don't care about
what's
what they
actually
believe.
true. I care about
You
what's
care
actually
about what.
true.
See, but that's such a standard I doubt you hold consistently. I doubt
You
it.
think so?
Absolutely. So you're saying that just because someone believes something to be true is not enough evidence for you to claim it as like reputable evidence of that thing being true.
So if we're talking about a thing existing
Yes,
compared with somebody's belief in that thing existing,
correct.
yeah, belief in a thing
I'm talking
existing is
about
evidence of the thing existing. Sure.
I'm talking about something existing that's not tangible. You can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't smell it, you can't touch it.
But it's
So
a
the
real
only
thing, right? Like it's something that is like it's like a concrete object, like it exists. Maybe not physically in
No.
the universe, but like it exists, maybe metaphysically or something.
No, I'm not talking, for example, people believing the Earth is flat, but you can actually physically prove, of course, it's not flat.
No,
I'm
no,
not speaking
we're talking
about
about God, right? Like if somebody believed that Voldemort was real, that's not evidence that Voldemort's real.
I agree with you, but if someone believes that something is real and it's not
Mhm.
something that's tangibly proven, would you deny everyone's claim that that is real then?
And wait,
Okay, let me
and
be
it's
more
not
specific.
something
Let me
that's
be more.
tangibly. I mean, it's clear that you're referring to trans people. Like everybody knows that.
No,
that's
I'm
what
not
that's what
referring
you're getting
to.
at.
I'm not referring to trans people. I mean, that's a good example we could go to, but I was referring to cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like the most commonly used form of therapy. How do we know that it's effective? Because you believe in people's testimony.
I don't know. It's not my area. I'm not well studied on CBT.
So, would you reject therapy being beneficial?
I would generally trust the psychiatrists and psychologists who study it because it's not my area. So I would be like, look, if this is what the consensus is on like what's useful for treating XYZ thing, then they're more well informed on it than I am.
My point is that people's testimony definitely is evidence. You don't have to accept that it's credible evidence, but it's evidence nonetheless.
Oh, okay. So I think I get what you're getting at, and I think that there's a pretty it's a subtle, but I think it's an important symmetry breaker. So there's two sets of claims being made here, right? One is I believe that XYZ thing about the external world is true. The other is I believe something about my internal experience is true. Now, the latter, we can use testimony as the only piece of evidence for the latter, because the only person or the only way to access the internal experience of somebody is to talk to them, basically. So that's the only type of evidence we can use. However, if you're trying to refer to something external of yourself, something in the outside world, something that exists outside of your subjective experience, then testimony should be treated as insufficient. Obviously. Because it's the weakest form of evidence. Now, it happens to be that for subjective experience, it's the only form of evidence, so the weakest form of evidence also is the strongest form of evidence in that case, but it's not the strongest form of evidence in any other case.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So you're saying if it's not something that is being claimed that's external, like God or an alien species, and the only evidence you have of that is your subjective experience, then that's not credible evidence.
No,
right?
I think you got it backwards. So if you're making a claim about the external world, then subjective experience isn't particularly useful evidence for that thing.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. But if you're making a claim about your subjective experience, then your subjective experience is great evidence for that.
See, that's another. Okay, so when women are out here accusing men of rape, that's an external thing. But if there's no external proof of this, we take their subjective experience as credible evidence. So that goal, I don't know if you do, but most people, at least liberals, they accept, oh no, her subjective claim about this external thing that happened, oh, that's true. We don't have any external proof that it's true, but her subjective claim is sufficient evidence to believe that it's true.
So, I mean, like I said, why
are we picking
testimony,
and choosing what evidence?
We're not. I'm answering your question. Like I said, testimony or subjective experience is a form of evidence. It's just a weak form of evidence. So if you were to take this to trial, somebody's like rape accusation, and the only evidence was testimony, the person would get off scot-free, right?
Trump didn't get off scot-free. He had to pay a lot of money. And the only evidence she had was testimony. I don't want to make this a political thing. I'm just saying that society's standards of testing evidence shifts when away from God, but when it's the same standard of evidence, they accept when it's just a woman blabbing about something that happened 30 years ago. When the only evidence she has is her testimony.
I'm not so familiar with the case, but my understanding is it wasn't just the testimony of, what was her name? E. Jean Carroll? It wasn't just her testimony that was used as evidence. But I'm not so familiar with the case, so I can't really say much more than that.
Okay, fair enough. But I'm just saying that whether it's E. Jean Carroll or someone else, there are definite times where what you just presented, an external claim, but the only evidence is a subjective experience, then we have to accept the subjective experience in some cases. And yeah, you even presented another one like the trans argument. So we have to accept
but the mistake with that one is that is a subjective subjective testimony about a subjective claim about their subjective experience. At least that's what people on my side of the aisle. That's how people on my side of the aisle view it.
Well, I'd be careful with that because so is anorexia. Someone that's claiming to be overweight, that's their way they're identifying, and it's something you could externally prove. And you say, no, but we don't affirm someone that's anorexic that they are in fact overweight. We don't take their subjective testimony.
But overweight is an external thing, not an internal thing.
I know it's an external thing, and so is biological
it's a different category.
Sex. No, but so is biological sex.
We're talking about gender, not biological sex. But this is pretty off topic, so we should probably shift back to topic if you want.
My point is that subjective experiences is evidence. And it's substantial evidence. You don't have to.
It's evidence. It's just not very convincing. It's generally a pretty weak form of evidence.
I would agree with you if it was only one culture in the world that believed in some kind of God. Every culture in every part of the world throughout human history, modern human history, has believed in some kind of creator or creators.
So
that's evidence.
I absolutely agree. That is a type of evidence. The question is, how strong is that evidence? Now, typically, evidence is stronger when it can only be explained by when it only has one possible explanation, right? Well, I'm sure you understand what I mean by that. However, there are alternate explanations for why humans are so overwhelmingly likely to have spiritual beliefs, and that could be that it's evolutionarily beneficial, could be that it stems from some like early societal fluke that kind of spread throughout all of the societies. Like there could be a whole bunch of explanations for why this is the case that don't rely on like a supernatural divine being. So the fact that so many people believe this could imply that God is real, yeah, or it could imply that this is just a thing that humans tend to do.
But how could you make an evolutionary argument to why humans would have evolved to have some spiritual beliefs? By the way, humans that didn't communicate with different cultures, that didn't have a way to communicate, yet they all arrived at a conclusion that there is a higher being.
Yeah, I mean, like, generally, and again, not an evolutionary biologist, but I'm sure that we can definitely both kind of like do some speculation here. One way that you could see this happening, for example, is by observing that humans tend to form hierarchies. At least like at the kind of like the tribal level, not tribal in like the kind of like derogatory sense, but at like the level of like small communities, there tends to be, like you have the chief of your tribal community, and then you have like, your elders and so on and so forth. And so it'd be a very natural thing to think that, well, the chief is just a man. And, there's always somebody more powerful. There's always somebody that's higher ranked. But if there's no person higher ranked, then maybe there's something else. Is it like totally reasonable to think that people could extrapolate natural social tendencies to come up with some sort of supernatural belief system?
Perhaps that is a possibility. But I think the fact that every culture, every society throughout human history believed in a higher being, and they all just somehow arrived at that same conclusion, possible conclusion that you just presented, is very unlikely. I think that they just have had tons of experiences with a higher order to arrive at the conclusion that there's not just because of some arbitrary belief that, well, we have an authority figure that's human, therefore there must be a higher authority figure that's not human that, presides over all of us. It's possible, but why would every culture arrive at that same or very similar conclusion?
Well, every culture is made of the same kind of human. Why is it that every human, not every human, but most humans who take like psychedelics will end up feeling, or let's not say psychedelics, let's say MDMA. Every human that takes MDMA will feel like super in love with everybody around them. It's because we all have the same brain chemistry. And that drug does a certain thing to human brain chemistry, and it does the same thing to everybody's brain chemistry. So and every society is made of humans, so we're all going to have similar ways of coming to understandings about how the world works, at least at large scale
that's
population
super
size.
Interesting that you believe that, because okay, that's really interesting, because you think the humans are all the one race?
Well,
like we're the
one
same
species.
human race? Yeah, like dogs are the same species, but there's different breeds of dogs. Like, why wouldn't that carry over from an atheist point of view, outside of like not wanting to virtue signal and insult people? Why wouldn't that carry over to humans?
Why wouldn't there be different kinds of humans?
No. There's the same species of dog, right?
Yeah.
But different breeds with different intelligence levels, different behaviors. Different breeds exhibit different. Okay, exactly. Why wouldn't that carry over to humans? From an atheist point of view, if dogs evolve like that, why wouldn't humans?
In principle, if aliens came and started doing selective breedings of humans, it could happen. But
there was selective breedings of humans in slavery for many hundreds of years. So there has been selective breeding.
That lasted for a few hundred years, which is just not enough on an evolutionary timescale. It's not enough to have any significant effects.
But why do you reject the notion that perhaps different races of humans have evolved differently? You just think, oh no, we all just evolved the same. We're all the same. Nothing's different.
So
no, I don't believe the brains are the same.
Different human groups are different from each other. Some human groups have, more melanin so that they can withstand a more intense sun, like sun rays or whatever.
Yes, but you're speaking about the brain. That's why I brought this up, because you're speaking.
So there's this principle in evolutionary biology, and I forget what it's called, but basically, the features that are more internal to a body, so think like organs, think like things, or at even a more fundamental level, like cellular structure. The further they are from like direct contact with the outside world, the slower they change evolutionarily. So like skin color can change very, very quickly evolutionarily because it's in direct contact with the outside world. It is directly influenced by the sun, for example. Similarly, things like height and hand shapes and
Yeah, I
ear
get that,
size,
but
all
then why did
these are all
dog
external
brains?
things. But brains are internal.
Dog brains
It's
changed
an organ.
radically, but dog brains
Well,
change radically from breed
right,
to breed to
because
breed.
so the reason why we're able to this is the reason why artificial selection is so effective is because we don't have to rely on just the environment to cause incidental changes in a population. We can just select for the internal characteristics we want to select for. But
Yeah, just like with
but the
humans.
only way natural selection works is it selects based off of interaction with the environment. So you're going
Well,
to have the most
slavery has happened
significant
for
changes.
thousands of years, not just a few hundred years. Slavery's happened
Yeah,
for thousands.
and no selective breeding really happened there. Nobody was selecting for intelligence or strength or whatever. People were selecting people. Well, okay, so it might be true that like at least in like the antebellum South, like there was some selection for like strength or something, but that was like 10 generations maybe, and so not really enough to have any significant significant evolutionary effects.
Well, so and then you're saying selective breeding would be the only thing to bring about changes in the in the brain chemistry?
Well, no, it's just how it would happen rapidly, right? In principle, if humans it'll never happen naturally anymore because humans are so intertwined. But like if there were like isolated pockets of humans
What?
that
How can you say it can't happen naturally? You just threw that
not
out.
anymore, not anymore. Just because humans are so intertwined, like there's no isolated pockets where you can have like long-term genetic drift, right? The point is that like if it were the case that you had like one group of people who were on some isolated island for like 100,000 years that never came in contact with any other humans, they might diverge evolutionarily in a pretty significant way because they might have their own set of conditions that they have to adapt to, and the rest of humanity has some other set of conditions, and absolutely they could develop different traits. But
That exists
current
right now.
conditions-
There are untouched tribes.
Well, there's
that live.
like a few. Yeah.
So it is
absolutely.
possible. Naturally, it is possible.
Well,
then.
yeah. I was assuming that we were talking about like humans on like a grand scale, like the entirety of humans. Like it very well could be the case that if these super isolated communities stay super isolated for like another 100,000 years, then yeah, absolutely, we could definitely diverge from them. But I suspect that probably won't happen because it's hard for communities to stay isolated for that long.
But that didn't happen with dogs, though. We didn't isolate dogs from other dogs. We just crossbreeded and new breeds came into existence. So you're saying you couldn't make a new
What do you
breed of
think?
dog?
So selective breeding is precisely isolation. Now, the way that you do the isolation is you don't have to keep them like physically separated from each other because they're not going to like accidentally like have sex with each other. You just prevent them from breeding with each other, right? You only breed the ones that you want to breed
But
together.
when you look at like Japanese culture, Japanese people, there's plenty of Japanese people that are 100% pure blood Japanese that never crossbreeded with any
Well,
other
yeah,
races.
up until about 200 years ago or so.
There's still plenty
Maybe
that are
300
100%.
years ago. Well, no.
There's still
Please. Up until about like 300 years ago or so, they just didn't really have any contact with the rest of the world. Or rather, they didn't really allow contact with the rest of the world. And then it opened up again like 150 years ago or so. And so like there was a period of time, like, I don't know, like 1,000 years or so, where they were pretty isolated. But 1,000 years is like nothing on an evolutionary timescale.
Hold on one second. All right, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, my bad. So, yeah, I think it's interesting to see kind of the squirming, not necessarily that you're doing, but a lot of atheists do when approaching the question of, well, then why would all brains and humans be the same? We're all one human race if billions of years of evolution led to this point. Absolutely, we're not. Of course, we're not. If that's the case, we're definitely not. Like
Well,
even
what is true
Darwin
is that-
wouldn't accept that.
So absolutely, humans are not all the same. But the distinction we make by race is not the distinction that will talk about like the important distinctions, like internal organs and things like that, right? Because again, race is like race where we talk about like nose shape and skull shape and skin color and all these things. Those are all very external features which change very rapidly and don't really correlate with things like internal structures. So The notion that like the races are different is like just not a very useful distinction.
Darwin doesn't agree with you about that, though.
I don't care what Darwin believes. He's dead.
You don't care what Darwin believes?
He's dead.
You care
Why
what
would
he
I care
believes
what he
about a lot
believes?
of things, though.
Not really. I care about the work that he did. I think the work that he did was important, but I don't care about the person. I don't care what he believed. I don't care what he personally believed.
But the work that he did led him to the conclusions that he did about the different races. So you just reject that. I think it's just like this virtue signaling thing.
Well, I mean, do you have any like objections to the reasoning that I gave, or are you just like, just mad that I gave a reason rather than crying and pulling out my purple hair? Like,
no, I think that if no God, atheism, evolution, billions of years, of course humans are not one human race. Of course, the different races are like different breeds, 100%, and that would explain a lot of the behavioral differences that we see.
That just doesn't follow.
It absolutely follows.
Not every population has like vastly different breeds. Not every species is composed of vastly different breeds. Like dogs are almost unique in that regard. Dogs and cats, really, and that's because we bred them to be that way. If you go look out in the wild and you go look at like, I don't know, like polar bears or whatever, all the polar bears are the same, right? If you go look at like, I don't know, kangaroos, all the kangaroos are the same. Well, they're different species of kangaroos, but if you look at one species of kangaroo, all of the members of that species are basically the same.
Right, but you have different, let's say, denominations of the species of kangaroo. They're not all the same.
No, you don't. That's the point.
But okay, so let's say with
the distinction that we see in dogs, where you have like some dogs that are like 10 times the size of other dogs, that distinction only exists in dogs. Like that level of a different phenotype only exists in dogs, and like to a lesser extent cats.
In chimpanzees, you have different behavioral patterns from, and not all chimpanzees are the exact same. Let's say it's not called breed, but of the same group of the species. There's different groups of the chimpanzee species, and they have different behavioral traits.
Is there evidence of this?
Yeah, I mean, I just looked it up a few days ago.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to see it.
It's like interesting that we just don't apply it to humans, though.
Well, it doesn't apply to humans, just like how it doesn't apply to kangaroos, and it doesn't apply to polar bears. Like it just doesn't. Sorry. You're like picking and choosing. Dogs, they're really, really different from each other. Therefore, humans must be the same. It's just like smooth-brained. Like, no, most animals are not like dogs. Dogs are the exception here.
There are 4 subspecies of chimpanzees: the Western, Central, Eastern, and Nigeria Cameroon chimpanzee. And if you want to look up if there's different behaviors.
All right, and what are the and you know that Homo sapiens sapiens is a subspecies of the Homo sapiens species, right?
Yeah, but we're talking about the chimpanzees.
Yeah, I know. So if you want to make an adequate comparison, what you would do is you would look at the distinct characteristics between one subspecies of chimpanzee and compare it with humanity, because humanity is a subspecies of Homo sapiens.
Okay.
There are other subspecies of Homo sapiens, like Homo sapiens neanderthalis, for example, but they're extinct.
Wait, let me look up one more thing here about this before I respond.
Okie dokie.
Okay, so to clarify, 4 different subspecies of chimpanzees. Yes, they have different behaviors depending on the subspecies, and also, yes, they can reproduce. So perhaps there's just different subspecies, races of humans. Yes, we can reproduce, but the different races have different behavioral characteristics.
So how do you think that subspecies are demarcated?
I mean, I'm using that in a abstract notion of subspecies. I'm replacing subspecies with race.
Right. But so a subspecies is like a specific genetic dissimilarity, right? So like you would go look at the genetics of like these different subspecies of chimpanzee, and you would find that there are like 4 distinct genetically dissimilar groups, like sufficiently dissimilar that they have different features, like in a pretty significant way.
That's exactly with humans, though.
However, if you go do the same thing with humans, if you You can say Asian, dude. What is this? The
No, because
1850s?
Asian's also Indian. Asian is a lot. Asians
Okay,
actually
you can say East Asian then.
What's wrong with? I'm being specific to the kind of Asian. I'm not talking about the brown Indian Asians. I'm not speaking about the East Russian Asians. I'm speaking about the Oriental Asians. Are you going to say that's racist or something, or like xenophobic?
I mean, it just makes you sound like fucking Mark Twain riding on a steamboat down the Mississippi River talking about your N-word friend or something. Like, it's just man, it's just not a good look.
Okay, then the Southeast Asian population, I don't look like that. They do look different, and their culture is extremely different.
Sure, but genetically, they're more similar to you than the different subspecies of chimpanzees are to each other. But the human race is one subspecies, right? There are other human subspecies, but they're just extinct now. There were other human subspecies.
So what's your evidence that the 4 subspecies of chimpanzees is less similar than
because they have the subspecies distinction. That's how we make those kind of distinctions.
Okay, you can call it whatever. Yeah, you're saying it's a subspecies distinct. There's a distinction of those 4 groups. Mm-hmm. So why are those 4 groups less similar than I am to an Asian person?
I mean, you'd have to go look at exactly how the subspecies distinction was made, but I imagine it's genetic, that there's a bigger genetic difference.
So you just said that it's less similar, but you don't actually have concrete evidence that it's less similar.
Well, that's my understanding. Again, I'm not a biologist, and you're not a biologist either. But if you want to check, you can. If you have this question, I imagine that you would be interested in knowing what the answer is, right?
I just think you're getting squirmy around the idea that races could actually be biologically different in more ways than just skin color.
And you seem really driven by this idea that races should be biologically different in other ways than just skin color.
Am I asserting that belief?
It sounds like you are. It sounds like you're trying really hard to convince me that that's. Like that? Well, it sounds like you've been trying to convince me that that's what I should believe.
No, I believe we're all of equal value because God created us. But you believe that there's no God, so we evolved. There is no natural specific order to how things evolved. So why are humans distinct in not being subspecies? But every other species on the planet, for the most part, has like different characteristics in the way they evolved. I think not every other species on the planet has like a whole bunch of different subspecies. No, not all. No, but I think that you have a bias here, a liberal bias that you don't want to accept that perhaps
I'm not even a liberal.
Okay, a leftist bias, it's left of center on the ideological.
An academic bias, perhaps. Someone who cares about facts. Yes, you're right. I do have a bias
I just told you facts
towards the real world. What facts did you tell me? You told me.
I told you the different behaviors of the 4 subspecies of chimpanzees, etc. And you're like, oh, but they're less similar than you are to.
Well, yeah, that's typically how we make taxonomic distinctions. Well, so you're right. So RC, you're right. I don't know about the specific subspecies distinctions. However, one of the ways that we make other taxonomic distinctions, species, genus, family, subfamily, superfamily, and so on, is with genetics. So it is reasonable to infer that other taxonomic distinctions, like subspecies, would use the same type of distinction.
I don't really see how that's responding directly to how you can prove that we're less similar or more similar than chimpanzee subspecies.
How I can prove that we're more similar?
No, I'm saying your knee-jerk reaction was to say we're more similar.
It sounds like you're trying to convince me that I should believe that there are big, important distinctions between different types of humans. It sounds like that's what you're trying to convince me.
Oh, if there's no God and we evolved billions of years, there's no question that there is. Of course there is. You think all races...
Wait, why?
Why? Because different races up until modern times had absolutely no contact with each other for a very long time. So they evolved differently. They didn't evolve exactly the same. They had different environments, just like the different subspecies.
Tens of thousands of years is not a very long time.
Do you notice that the 4 subspecies of chimpanzees is broken up from Western, Central, Eastern, and Nigeria? So they grew up in 4 different places. So you're saying human beings that were evolving in different areas of the world for many hundreds of thousands of years didn't evolve differently?
I mean, they weren't really. Like, humans basically...
They literally were, though.
Humans basically stayed as one population, or rather spread out and then remingled and then spread out and then remingled a bunch of times.
The different races didn't, though.
Please. Humans basically did that up until like 60, 70,000 years ago. And then there was a branch out that never came back together.
But you're saying humans did this, but so
yeah,
did chimpanzees.
That's what humans did.
But what differentiates the 4
Well,
subspecies?
I don't know if chimpanzees did that.
Of course they didn't, because there's 4 subspecies because they grew up in different areas of the world.
Yeah, so maybe they've been isolated for longer than humans have.
Maybe that's your bias coming through.
Look, you're trying to convince me that I should believe something that you don't even believe. So why should I believe this unless there's evidence for it?
I'm saying that I'm trying to show you that your bias is in the way of accepting.
There's no
something
bias here. You're just not presenting any evidence for the claim.
I just did. These 4 subspecies.
What evidence? The chimpanzees have nothing to do with how interrelated humans are.
Chimpanzees are our closest related relative outside of humans.
I agree.
So,
I'm glad that you accept our winning evolution.
So the fact that they evolved in different areas of the world and evolved to be 4 different subspecies shows us that the races of different humans evolving in different areas of the world would all arrive at the same conclusion. But you're rejecting that premise.
No, it says it's possible. Yeah. It says it's possible. It doesn't say that that's what happened.
Oh, you think it's possible that humans might actually have biological differences outside of skin color?
I'm saying that could have happened historically. I don't think it did, though.
No, I'm saying right now. Do you accept
no,
that that's
no, no. I don't think it can happen anymore. No.
Bias.
It's because we're not isolated anymore.
That doesn't. Even if we're not isolated, crossbreeding brings about different characteristics, as you see in different species of dogs. If you crossbreed these different chimpanzees, that'll bring about new behavioral characteristics. It doesn't mean that it never happened. You're rejecting that that's the case anymore. That's your bias.
So evolutionary divergence requires isolation. That's how evolution happens, right?
And different races were isolated for very long periods of time.
That's irrelevant for the question you asked. You asked whether it's possible now. You asked whether it's possible now, and we are no longer isolated.
But they were isolated, so...
That's irrelevant for the question you asked. You asked whether it's possible now.
So for the times that they were isolated, is
about
it possible?
70,000 years.
Yeah. So
it seems to have not been enough time in order to cause that much genetic distinction.
You don't want to answer the question because it's your bias.
I just answered the question.
No, I'm saying before we crossbreeded and before we all mixed together, all the races mixed together, for those many tens of thousands of years, are you asserting that more than 70,000 years?
About
but are you
70,000 years.
Okay, it's more than 70,000 years. It's not 70,000 years and we all mixed together. That's not what happened.
How many thousand years was it?
Well, Earth is not even that old, so...
Well, yeah, so I don't know why you're saying that it's not 70,000 years.
Okay, so you're just saying 70,000 years. You're just throwing that number out.
No, that's like the anthropologically accepted like timeline as to when humans kind of spread out across the world.
Okay, so you're saying 70,000 years is not enough time for these different races of humans to have evolved differently?
Sorry, one sec. I have the puzzle thing. Yeah, so I mean, it's long enough for small distinctions to develop, like differently shaped eyes and ears and nose and skin color. Sure,
but nothing with the brain.
But like I said, I've mentioned this already. I don't know why. Like
you don't want to talk about the brain. Change.
I'm literally talking about it right now. Internal features take longer to change than external features, and 75,000 years is not enough time to change the brain in significant ways. Just doesn't seem to be the case.
Quickly with dogs. It didn't take 70,000 years to change the brain chemistry of dogs.
RC, do you have the memory of a goldfish? Because I literally explained why that's distinct in the case of dogs. Because natural selection and artificial selection are very, very different.
And also, what's your evidence that it takes longer than 70,000 years of isolated populations to evolve their brain differently?
The fact that it seems to be the case that the brains of different humans is basically the same. It's basically the same as other brains.
No, that's not true though.
Oh, do you have evidence to the contrary? I mean, that's what I learned. But I mean, if you have evidence to the contrary, I'd like to see that. We're
First of
talking
all,
about
the male
we're
and
talking
female
about
brain
the
is different.
brains. We're talking about the brains of different racial groups.
Yeah, but you're saying human brains all the same. Human
Human
brains are not all
brains
the same.
across, with the relevant distinction being racial groups, they are. Of course, there's sexual dimorphism.
Oh, human brains across different races are exactly the same?
I never said they're exactly the same. No,
So there
no
are
two human brains.
differences.
RC, are you this dishonest? No two human brains are exactly the same, obviously. But
Are you saying that?
as far as what I learned when I was taking biology, when I was learning about it, which, you know, I don't know if you were paying attention to, the racial differences are essentially skin deep.
Oh, and perhaps maybe your biology teacher had a bias and
Do you have
wasn't
evidence to
actually...
the contrary? Or are you just going to cry
Yes.
and scream about racism? Like,
No, see, you don't want to have this discussion. You don't.
well, it seems like you're really, really keen on convincing me that I should be a racist when I've given you the
convincing you that you should
reasons
be a
why
racist?
I'm not. I've
not
given
telling
you
you
the
you should hate a
reasons,
race.
the evidence-based reasons why I don't think that there is any actual distinction beyond skin deep
because that's your
distinctions
bias
between
coming through.
different so-called racial groups. And if you
Oh,
have
yeah.
evidence to the contrary, you should show me. But
The four
otherwise,
subspecies of
why would I
chimpanzee
believe
shows
that?
it.
That has nothing to
four
do with humans. It's unrelated.
You know how long that they were isolated from each other, the four subspecies?
Tell
'Cause
me.
You said that it was
How
longer.
many?
No,
How many?
you don't even know. See, that's the thing. You don't
Do
even
you
know.
know?
and you
Do you know?
I can find out right now, but
Okay,
I'm
do
not
it.
making a claim. I'm not.
You're
the one
literally
making
the
a
one
claim
making
that
a
it's
claim.
possible. No, I'm showing that it's possible.
I
That's
agreed
it.
that it was possible, and then
No,
it
you
seems to have
didn't.
not happened.
With humans, you don't. With
Wait,
humans,
no,
you don't.
I literally said it. You really don't remember. I literally said, yeah, it could have happened, but it didn't.
How do you know it didn't? I see different races behaving very differently from another. I see that. That's very evident.
I
to
see
me.
different. I see different people acting very differently from one another.
No, no. I see races in general acting different. You don't see that?
What's a race?
Oh, there's like 5 races of humans.
So, would you say that all
different
sub-Saharan
race makeups
Africans
of
are the
humans?
same race?
No, I wouldn't say they're all the same race, but if they're 100% sub-Saharan African, then yeah, they are part of the same.
Okay, because
race.
they're more genetically distinct from each other than you and I are from each other.
What does it have anything to do with behavior?
Well, the point is that they are more. There is a bigger genetic distinction amongst a single race, you know, sub-Saharan African, black people or whatever. There's more genetic variation there than there are across, right, like between like Middle Eastern people and like Northern Europeans.
But I see they're behaving different. I see the way Arabs behave, Asians behave, white people in Europe behave, and it's different behavioral patterns. You can scoff at that all you want. That's my observation. There's nothing wrong with the observation. I just
Okay.
recognize.
Do you have data to support this position, or should I just...
Same data that it's observational data. That's the same thing.
Well, it sounds like anecdotal. It sounds like an anecdotal story.
That's literally every scientist. They have anecdotal observational data.
Not really. Anecdote. The plural of anecdote is not data, by the way.
So the data that I'm presenting you is observational.
You're not presenting me with data. You're presenting me with anecdotes.
Okay. I mean, it's obvious you have a bias here. I get it. You want to reject the notion that, oh, humans maybe could have evolved differently. No way. That's not possible. The only difference is a skin color. Nothing inside. Everything's the same. It's ridiculous to accept that notion if you're an atheist.
Well, that's a wild straw man that like atheists should believe that, but okay, if that's what you want to think, I guess. Do you still think that God shouldn't have caused the Holocaust, shouldn't have intervened in the Holocaust?
Oh, you were listening to that yesterday? No, God should
Yeah,
not have
it was real bad.
It was real bad for the guy I was debating, yes.
Oh, no.
God should not have intervened because then he would be restricting our free will. You think God should have, if the God that I believe exists, let's say just for the sake of argument, if that God exists, and you're saying that it would have been good for that God to intervene and prevent the Holocaust from happening.
Yeah, under your worldview, yeah.
Under my worldview, okay. So then applying that same standard, would it be good for that same God to prevent any woman from getting an abortion?
Under your worldview? Yeah, probably.
No, I'm asking you because you're holding me
Well, I don't
accountable.
believe in God.
I said for the sake of argument, since you're saying I lost that debate yesterday because I didn't want to concede that God should have intervened, and you're saying that, well, the right position would be that God should have intervened to prevent the Holocaust. He should have stopped the free will of the Nazis and intervened and prevented the Holocaust from happening. Yeah, then should that same God also have prevent any woman from getting an abortion or any homosexual from getting married?
I don't think so. Unless you think that this God hates gay people and doesn't want abortions to happen.
No, he loves his creation. He hates sin. He does hate sin. And getting in, and
okay, well then if this God exists, then if this God exists and that's the way that God feels about, say, gay people, then yeah, he should intervene.
No, he shouldn't, because then he's a ruthless dictator that's forcing us to do what he wants.
But he did intervene. He did intervene with Pharaoh.
But Pharaoh wasn't trying to unalive all the Israelites.
That makes it even worse for you, bud, because he intervened. Wait, hold on. Hold on, RC, hear me out. Pharaoh was only going to try to re-enslave them, which is less bad than genocide. Yet he intervened when he was just trying to re-enslave them. But he wouldn't intervene when somebody was trying to do a full genocide? Why would God intervene on a lesser crime, but not intervene on a greater crime?
I don't know why God... First of all, he didn't intervene immediately with Pharaoh. He didn't. Pharaoh made the decisions
but
that
he did intervene eventually, right?
Yeah, so Pharaoh was not successful, right? In what Pharaoh wanted to do. He was unsuccessful.
Because God intervened.
Sure. So Schmittler was also unsuccessful.
No, he wasn't. He was very successful.
No, he wasn't. He lost the war.
His goal was to get Jews out of Europe.
No, his goal was to destabilize the Soviet Union and get rid of communism from the world, and he was unsuccessful in that. So,
I thought we were talking about the Holocaust, not like general World War II.
Okay, so Schmittler was unsuccessful in his goals. He didn't succeed.
Well, he didn't succeed in his goals about the USSR, but he definitely succeeded in his goals about Jews.
Oh, so there's no Jewish people?
The population of Jewish people in Europe is basically zero.
Oh, so in the world there's no
his goal was to get Jewish people out of Europe.
Okay, so he didn't succeed. Wait, Germany's one country of Europe.
Yeah.
So of all the other countries,
there's no Jewish people in any of them. There's only Jewish people in England and France, really, in Europe. Those are the only countries that have Jewish people still remaining.
So here's what Schmittler wanted to end: Jewish people and their influence. Jewish people still exist.
No, he wanted to get Jewish people out of Europe. That was his goal.
And there's still Jewish people in Europe, therefore still not successful.
The only places that there are Jewish people in Europe are in France and England.
That's not even true. You don't think there's Jewish people that live in Germany?
No, I mean there's obviously some Jewish people who have moved back and stuff, but those are the only significant population centers. That's it.
There's 1.3 million Jewish people living in Europe. That's not
enough. and they're all in France and England.
Okay,
there's so 10,000 Jews overall in the rest of Europe.
So Pharaoh failed, so did Schmittler. How do you know God didn't intervene? Schmittler didn't win the war. Schmittler wasn't successful in what he wanted, so he failed. How are you going to say that God didn't intervene?
Wait, no. I mean, if his goal was to, get rid of the Jews from Europe, he basically succeeded.
No, he didn't, because there's Jews in Europe, so he didn't succeed. You keep saying he succeeded and he didn't.
I said that he basically succeeded.
So you think if Schmittler was alive right now, looking at Europe and looking at the world, you think, oh yeah, my mission was successful.
He'd probably look at France and be like, bummer, that one got away. But then otherwise he'd be like, yes, the European continent, I don't know what a fucking term the European continent is free of the Jew, and he'd be like, aha, except France. But then he tried to invade France.
You think he'd be happy with the state of Germany right now?
Probably not, but that has nothing to do with the Jewish people.
So he was unsuccessful. His
goals weren't only about Jewish people. He cared about other things too. But with regards to Jewish people, he basically succeeded, yeah.
Okay, so Schmittler was not successful.
With regard to all of his goals,
everything that he wanted, he wasn't successful. Everything he wanted.
No, I mean the fact that there's basically no Jews left in the entirety of continental Europe except France is a success for him.
No,
unfortunately.
No, it's not. Though.
Okay.
It's not a success. So you keep saying that he lost the war.
So wait, do you consider does it count as a genocide if they only get 90% of them?
They were in the process of being genocided.
Does it? Well, Does it have to be 100% in order for the genocide to be?
No, it doesn't. He obviously
Okay.
there was a genocide.
So he did that. So he succeeded.
but he
he
wasn't
succeeded in his
successful.
genocide,
No, he did
right?
not. No, he did not
Wait,
succeed.
but a genocide happened, right?
Yes.
If a genocide happened, then he was
and
successful in making a
also
genocide.
happened. Oh, he was successful in the war, but he lost the war and he lost everything that he wanted to do. Hitler was not a success. If Schindler was successful, the world would look extremely different right now. And he wasn't successful.
The fact that so do you think that, putting aside the success, do you think that like let's put it this way. Let's say that you have two buttons, right? You can only push one of them. One button is stop the slave trade that's going on in, say, North Africa right now and the Middle East. Button just stops all of it, right? The other button is stop every single ongoing genocide in the world. Which one do you press?
Neither.
You can only press one, and you have to press one.
No, I'm
Wait,
not
what?
taking
You would
that
press
full
neither?
decision.
What the fuck?
Yeah. I'm not
Why would you
pressing
press
a
neither?
button. Okay.
What?
Would you rather save 100 million people or have to grape your mother to save 100 million people? Or those 100 million people will pass away if you don't grape your mother right now?
Wait a minute. I offered
so
you
the
two
hypotheticals
good
now.
options. One is ending slavery. The other is ending genocides. You're not causing anything by pressing either button. In either case, you're doing something good. It's just a question of which one's better.
There's no. They're both bad. What do you mean? Which one's better?
So, look, they're both currently happening. You can choose to stop one of them. Which one do you choose to stop?
And you said
Or
that
do you
it's
just
only
choose... Or do you
No,
just
I'm not-
stop neither?
No, you're asking me which one is worse. Because if I select one, then
Yes,
you're
I'm
going,
asking
oh,
you which
think
one
the
is
other-
worse. Yes, there obviously genocide is worse than slavery. Like, I think we can all agree on that.
No, based off you have a subjective moral standard. You just subjectively pick and part. Oh yeah, this is worse because why? Because you feel it's worse.
Wait a minute. Okay, do you think that genocide is not worse than slavery?
You've already agreed to me that the balance to life on Earth would be better with less humans. Therefore, genocide is actually good for the life on Earth absent humans.
Okay, clipped and shipped. RC just said genocide is good.
According to your worldview, yes. You can.
Well, that's
clip
not
me
my
all you
worldview,
want.
but that's a cool straw man.
It is. You said that the life on Earth is better with less humans. You said this.
I said the other organisms might thrive
then
better.
From that perspective, then genocide would be good from that worldview. For the other,
Okay, but that's not my worldview. So why would I believe that?
because we cause more destruction than any other species on the planet. So
Okay.
less of us is better for them.
Why should I care about that?
Because you believe in that.
I believe that. Wait, why? Why should
You
I
believe
care
we
about like
evolved
what?
to this
Why should
point-
why should I care about what the other organisms are?
Because we have two different fundamental beliefs. You believe that we just evolved to this point and we're causing destruction to all the life around us for the most part. I believe
that's
they
true.
were created for our benefit.
Okay.
We're not causing destruction. This earth was created for human beings' benefit from the beginning.
So we're causing destruction. Why does that? How does that therefore
No.
entail
They're
that I think
subservient
that
to us. They were created to be subservient to human beings.
you're not? I mean, you're just strawmanning my position. Like, why would I believe? Why would just because like yes, I agree, humans are destructive to many organisms. Why would I then
Okay.
therefore believe that it's better? That it's
Because
like more
less
moral
humans-
for less humans to exist.
Because less humans equals less destructive behavior to
Okay, but
all the other
why
species.
should I care about that? Why should I care about what's
Because
going
you
on with the other
said that
species?
you said from your moral standard that it's immoral to cause harm to other species on the planet. So if you have less humans causing the harm, then
I
they're
never
gonna
said
be-
that.
You did say that at the beginning of our
Nope,
conversation.
I never said that.
Oh, so you don't think it's immoral to cause harm to other species?
I guess it depends on the species. Like if we're causing harm to like humans, that's
you do
pretty
hold that
bad.
it's immoral to cause harm to certain species that you deem that it's harmful to cause harm to.
Yeah,
Okay, so you do agree with me. So
I have
don't know
certain
why
things that
you're
I
right.
value and certain things that I don't. For example,
There-
if
okay.
like I'm kind of sad if you chop down a tree, but I'm not like morally disgusted.
Right. So you get to pick and choose what life.
Yes, that's what values are.
Mm-hmm. But your values are subjective to you, and your opinions change from like year to year. You don't hold
I
all
mean,
the
not
same
really. My
opinions you
opinion,
did 5
my,
years
my
ago.
opinions are pretty rigid. Pretty.
Oh, your
stubborn.
values have never changed?
Not that much. You know, once you become an adult, your values don't change much.
Okay, that's not what I asked. I said, have your values ever changed?
I mean, sure they have.
Okay, so
But
fair
not
enough.
much.
Okay, all right, man. So your values change; they're subjective to your worldview.
That's
That
what
sounds
values are,
anecdotal to
kind
me.
of by
Exactly.
definition.
So when I
Anecdotal, that's a category error, my guy.
no, you anecdotally have viewed life, and you have arrived at certain values based off your preferences.
That's not
That's
what an
hyper
anecdote is.
subjective.
What?
That is an anecdote. You have your own personal life experiences.
Mhm.
Perhaps, maybe I'm just hypothetically. Maybe you were spanked as a baby or spanked as a child, and you don't want to. Your value is to not spank children when you have kids of your own because of your own personal experiences. That's subjective. That has concreted one of your values.
It is absolutely subjective. That's what values are.
No, values from God are objective, and when you rip
Okay, buddy,
God
can you
away,
prove that?
yeah, God's
Okay,
values
prove
are
that.
not.
Prove that God exists.
No, I can give you my evidence to why I believe God exists, but there's no proof for or against God. There's no absolute proof if that's your standard of
No,
proof.
no. Okay, give me convincing evidence.
Life on Earth. Yeah, life on Earth existing is evidence in favor that we were created.
How do you figure?
Because you use the same evidence to say, well, it's obvious, looking at life on Earth, it's obvious that we weren't created.
I don't say that. I don't know why you keep strawmanning me.
Because you're an atheist. I'm an atheist. That's what you're saying.
That's never an argument
above
I've
you.
ever made. Like it seems like, do you work at a farm because you're really good at building straw man?
The good one.
I mean, you've done nothing but straw man me this entire conversation. I don't think you've accurately represented my worldview
You've literally
once.
straw man so many of my positions. You're like, oh, it sounds like you just want me to be racist. When did I say that? You just straw man positions of mine that I hold, and you're like, oh, you just want me to believe that genocide's actually good. No, I'm just criticizing or I'm questioning your belief system. That's what you guys do to us all the time.
You were trying to tell me what my belief system should entail, and when I tell you no, actually, it doesn't entail that for XYZ reasons, you just kind of go nuh-uh.
That's literally what atheists do to Christians all the time.
You just did it again. You just went nuh-uh. No, you.
Atheists want to criticize the Christian worldview, but when it happens to you guys, you flounder.
If you want to make an internal critique, that's fine, but an internal critique can't start from a straw man, and that's all you've been doing all night.
What straw man position did I start with in any one of my arguments?
You literally made one just now when you said that because I'm atheist, I have to view the destruction of environments as worthy of reducing the human population.
No. I asked you questions and arrived at that conclusion. You agreed to me that less humans equal less devastating consequences to the life around us.
Yeah.
So that equals less humans will mean less devastating consequences to the life around us.
That doesn't mean that I should think that that's bad.
So you just agreed if there's less humans, that will be good for certain causes, like less consequences.
Sure. It doesn't mean I have to care about that.
Dude, okay, man.
It doesn't follow from my views that that's like a morally bad thing or a morally good thing.
So you're saying genocide is bad?
Yes, I think it's bad.
Okay, genocide is bad because you're unaliving humans without their consent.
Yeah, that's one way you can put it.
Okay, abortion's genocide. Literally, you're unaliving humans without their consent.
I don't think that they're objects capable of consent.
But that's not what you agreed to, though. You agreed ending human life without their consent.
I don't think that fetuses can give consent. I don't think that fetuses are human beings. I don't think that they're human beings.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. A baby can't give consent at 6 months in the uterus. You know what? A baby also at 2 months old outside of the uterus can't give consent either.
Well, no, I don't think that they're human beings at like.
You don't think 2-month-old babies are human beings?
No, I don't think 3-month-old fetuses are human beings.
Okay, but you said that they can't give consent. Therefore, that's why.
No, they're not the kind of objects that could even in principle give consent.
Neither can a 1-month-old baby.
A 1-month-old baby could in principle give consent if they could like talk, but they can't. So
how could they? But they can't.
They're an object that could in principle give consent because they have an internal subjective experience.
What the hell are you saying right now? They can't give consent. So in reality, not in principle, in reality, they cannot give consent.
This is such a hard conversation for you, isn't it?
No, for you it is, because a 6-month-old fetus, from that point of view, is no different than a 1-month-old baby.
By the
No
way,
different at
I
all.
generally am not fond of like abortion past like the 5-month mark, so I don't know like what you think my position is.
So what happens from month 4 to month 5?
There's certain brain structures that develop that seem to be necessary for conscious experience.
So you're saying conscious experience is what's necessary to give human life value?
Yeah, to turn them in from, you know, not much more valuable than like a tree to something that's valuable because it has a subjective experience.
So subjective experience is what gives life value?
It's what I think gives human beings value.
You think, you feel, I get it. You think it, you feel it.
Yeah, it's called humility, RC. I would suggest you try it.
But that's your whole argument. I think and I feel this, therefore it is.
I was telling you my position. So when I give you my position, it's going to be, yes, my position is that XYZ. Or in other words, I think that XYZ.
I get it. But your whole worldview is based around I feel, I think, therefore is. Why should I accept that? Why should anybody accept your...
I'm not asking you to. You're the one who came on to try to convince me to believe in your God.
You literally have him an atheist above your head. You're trying to convince...
It says, I'm an...
Yeah, your God isn't real. Yeah, I get it. So you're trying to convince people... You're not trying to convince people that God isn't real. You have explicitly written, your God isn't real. So that's trying to... Okay, dude, what are you saying? We can call it there, man. I'm going to go get food. I'll talk to you later.
Ah, shoot, I'm muted on YouTube. Dang it. Thanks for letting me know. Look, y'all, RC is good content. Say what you like about him. He's good content. I'm actually going to bring on somebody from the YouTube. Let's bring on Andy. Can you hear me? Oh, Andy, can you hear me all right? Testing. Andy, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Let me bring you up really quick.
Got it.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Let me just believe I... Oh, actually, they might be able to hear you already. YouTube can...
Okay, testing.
Should be good. Now, I just don't know if TikTok can hear you. Go ahead and give me some...
All right, TikTok is definitely not Chinese spyware, etc.
Beautiful. I love it. Do you have video that you want to turn on?
Sure. Wait, can you see my, like, the... Hello?
Yeah, hey.
Yeah, what's up? All I see is a blue screen, though, so...
Yeah, that's because I can't stream to a billion different things. Actually, I can't get your video to play, so don't worry about it. I'm just going to put your name up. Your name's Andy, yeah?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. So, Andy, what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, so, that previous discussion sort of touched on the point that I wanted to bring up. I saw your exchange with Kevin Carnahan I think it was days ago, about like moral non-cognitivism, and then you, it's funny, at the beginning of the stream, you were talking about like Alex O'Connor, who is pretty well known for having his ethical emotivist position, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so like I'm wondering, like, what position do you take on the status of like morality as a construct? Like, are you a moral non-cognitivist, or are you like a moral anti-realist? Is there like a name that you would put on your position?
I'm not informed enough that I can be confident in that I'm like a moral XYZist or whatever. I'm some kind of anti-realist, some kind of, subjectivist or something like that.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. So the type of a sort of God that I want to argue for, uh, I don't know. Have you read Jonathan Swift's arguments against abolishing Christianity?
No, I haven't.
It's this satire, right? And it's meant to make fun of people who try to like make functional arguments against uh sort of becoming atheist. Like it begins with saying like you shouldn't abolish Christianity because if you do, then people will eat like babies because they taste good if you
Sure.
prepare them in a certain way. Yeah, so I hate to be that guy, but like I feel like any other argument sort of falls on its face. I feel like God functionally, um, if you want to define him as some sort of like abstract moral good, seems to be a very good like grounding for human rights. And I generally think that human rights are like a valuable thing.
So
But
are
it
we
seems
just
like they're
are we just defining
yeah.
God as like some grounds for, objective moral facts?
Uh, yeah, more or less, I would say so.
I mean, like, so I'm a moral anti-realist of some kind. So like I'm not necessarily going to grant that those are even the case, but even if I granted that that's the case, like that's consistent with atheism, I think.
Okay. Yeah, that could be the case.
Like
Let's like take on
you
your
could
like
be a Platonist, right? Like Platonists have like some
right.
sort of grounding for their moral facts, and
Yeah. I guess it would certainly not like directly tackle it, but like would you be comfortable with providing some sort of like secular or maybe anti-realist account for like the existence of human rights? Like, oh, how can they be justified under your worldview?
as so I can give an account as to why we have them. You'd have to explain what you mean by justified here. Do you mean like in some sort of like ultimate, like what is the foundation for like why they matter at all? Like that, I'm not sure if that even has an answer. But like why they exist at all can probably be pretty well accounted for just from an evolutionary perspective and the fact that we're a social species. Um, in this, and I suspect, again, this is like speculation, but I suspect that generally speaking, like morality and the kinds of things that follow from it are a result of the fact that like altruism and these kinds of behaviors are pretty evolutionarily beneficial when you're trying to survive and thrive in like group environments.
Hmm. So that sort of makes sense. Like we had a discussion a couple months back about how you wouldn't necessarily expect this sort of like moral behavior to arise, even necessarily from like a social species, from a reductive materialist account of the world. But more or less, what I was expecting is, are you familiar with like John Stuart Mill's rule utilitarianism?
Oh yeah, a bit.
Yeah, so he kind of tries to give an account for, well, he does give an account for human rights from a purely sort of utilitarian position, right? And the way he sort of goes about it is like it's not like a purely naively like hedonistic position. He proposes that there are like different levels of pleasure, right? And one of the like higher level pleasures is this sort of uh, the ability to self-determine, right? And so that
Sure.
like it necessarily follows that having liberty would be a sort of human right. It would be a rule. It would be a maxim that you'd follow under his framework.
Yep.
Um, for for Locke, right? Locke sort of gives a account for democracy and self-determination from a sort of a Christian perspective, which is to say that like humans have inherent value and
Sure.
such and such, like, etc. So, from like a sort of philosophical and moral framework, how would you ground moral or human rights?
I mean, the way I see it. I'm not sure if like perhaps we should instead say like how would I ground morality? Because I think that we can agree that once you have a moral framework, then it's pretty easy to see like once you have a moral framework, why that moral framework might lead you to think that human rights are a thing, right? Like if my moral framework leads me to believe that it's good that people are happy and it's bad that people are unhappy or something, and then I also think that people are happy when they're able to make their own choices, then that leads you to believe that human rights are a good thing, right? So
Right.
the point is I don't think that there is some like ultimate grounding of morality. I don't think that there's like some like objective grounding morality, because I'm an anti-realist of some kind, right? Which is to say, I think that I don't think that there are like moral facts about the world outside of, the human experience. And so I think that like the fact that humans developed these sort of, kind of social rules, which we call morality, or social kind of mores or behaviors, I think that that's, if there is an evolutionary explanation for it, then that's the way humans function, that we have these that our brain structure kind of not requires, but encourages us to develop some sort of like societal structures that play nicely with morality, or whatever morality was evolutionarily beneficial. And that seems to be something that's like generally likes altruism and hates greed and those kinds of things.
Okay, that's interesting, right?
This is all to say, I don't think that there's some like foundation. I think that this is something that kind of like arises in a sort of like not random way, but like in a naturally selected for way.
Yeah, that would make sense. Under sort of like a naturalistic account. So the problem is that I kind of see with this, and this entire thing comes up because the other day I was talking to a friend who lives in mainland China, and as you know, their government, their state tends to be a bit more centralized, a bit more totalitarian, a bit more authoritarian.
Sure.
And it seems to be the case that with like the purely like naturalist account, these sorts of like policies, for example, like the quarantine policies that were put into place, they were like fairly barbaric in China, right? Like you were very like tightly controlled. It seems to be the case that those would be like completely justified, but it seems also to be the case to be like against general human like moral intuitions, right? Even people in China were like, trying to protest, and they've grown up in this environment. They understand what it means to like live for the collective as opposed to the individual.
Sure.
Yeah, it's kind of yeah.
Well, so if your contention is just like, why did they do this? If this is some like feature of all humans, I would say that like is that the question, by the way?
More so the thrust of it is like with a purely like naturalist account of morality, purely stemming from like evolutionary success, it becomes like super difficult to account for these sorts of like not even edge cases, but these scenarios that fly completely against our moral intuitions. So like as an example, right, a bit more extreme than the COVID example, but I'm sure you've heard of this before, but like under a utilitarian account, if you go into a hospital, right, and you're a very healthy person, like can we steal your organs to save 5 people? And
not if you're a rule utilitarian, right?
Well, not if you're a rule utilitarian, but a rule utilitarian has like this interesting relationship with exceptions if you're given enough information, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like ideally, rule utilitarianism collapses into act utilitarianism, but like it seems like this would be completely like repugnant morally, right? I'm not sure if you would feel the same way, but
yeah, I mean, I generally think that stealing somebody's organs is a bad thing, so I would disvalue that.
Right, but it would seem to be the case that if this was like a purely on the basis of a success of a societal construct, or the success of a species, or the success of some particular tribal group, this would seem to be like the morally correct thing to do, right? Under your account?
No, I think that there's a confusion that's happening here, and it's probably because I didn't explain it well. So I think that generally, like, my account is something like this. Like, there are certain like very, very broad and kind of like very broad and low level kind of features of human psychology that are evolutionarily like malleable. And one of those would be like that generally like caring about your family is a good thing. Generally like being repulsed by violence, at least by violence towards people you care about, like or that violence towards people you care about is a bad thing. These kind of very, very low level, very rudimentary kind of like values I think that those things are like obviously like if you have a psychology that says actually violence against my relatives is good, then your bloodline will die out, right?
Yeah, that
So
would be
like those
pretty.
kinds of things are like obviously like evolutionarily influenced or can be evolutionarily influenced. But I don't think that like the much kind of higher level like, oh, should I unalive? Sorry, I have to use TikTok language. Should I unalive 2 people to save 3 people? That's too fine grained for us to have like some built-in psychological like disposition. And so I think what generally happens, and this is something like I don't know if this is true. This is kind of like where my intuition leads me, is that there's kind of like this very very rudimentary psychology that's kind of built in evolutionarily, and then the rest is kind of what's the word, things that like follow from that baseline given inputs from the environment. That's the way it seems to be. So like you'll have like this baseline of, you know, some sort of like ethical system or something like that, and everybody else will have that or a nearly identical baseline, and then based off of, you know, what the particular you know, environmental or what the particular environment is like around you at the time, and you know what flukes happen to be what flukes happen to develop into a trend in your society. Those will then influence how that kind of baseline develops into a fully fledged system of values. That's the way that I see it, kind of. At least that seems plausible. Because while it is true that like there are large like cultural differences in like the actual details of morality, like, you know, in some cultures like it might be okay to, I don't actually know if this is true, but in some cultures it might be okay to like chop off somebody's hand if they steal something. In other cultures it's not. But both cultures recognize that like there's something bad about stealing. So like there's like this kind of like very like fundamental like agreement that might be like a feature of like human psychology, but then how you actually deal with those, like the you know, the things that follow from it, those can vary dramatically. And so like I think that the questions of like, oh well, if evolution is just, if this is just an evolutionary thing and we just want to save the most people, we should donate organs, we should kill one person, donate their organs to save 5. Like I don't think our psychology is that like evolutionarily sophisticated that we can like do that math innately. We instead are like, killing people bad, and then we try to come up with some sort of justification as to why you shouldn't do that even though the math works out.
Okay. Just to clarify your position, I think it's like a super interesting one. Would you say that it's sort of like a kind of like an empiricist, sort of like a epistemologically empiricist account of morality? It seems like there's like this idea of like simple ideas that are sort of tuned into our biologies, and then we form more complex, like synthetic ideas from those sort of like baselines.
Sort of. I would say sort of, except in order to be empiricist, those simple ideas would have to come from external experiences, where I suspect those kind of simple ideas actually come internally. So in fact, it might be better called like rationalist, right?
Okay, yeah. Okay, that's interesting, right? Like the sort of primary like thing that I would say accounts for like most of these different things is like a big part of it is consent, right? Like, for example, would it be like a morally under most moral frameworks, it would be permissible to like jump on a grenade, right? Jump on a grenade to save 5 people, but then doing so without that consent, like forcing your buddy,
throwing
like,
a grenade at somebody,
that would not be
not
permissible.
consent. I would not consent to have a grenade thrown at me. Right.
And so like I'm not entirely sure how this like framework would sort of account for consent. Why would consent matter? For these like base like biological facts.
So I think that generally these kinds of like at least one potential accounting, and again, like this isn't like some fully fleshed out theory. This is just kind of like, this is an intuition I've had for a long time, and through discussions like these, I've kind of fleshed it out more. And you know, maybe I'm sure this is not original to me. I just, you know, I don't read a lot of moral philosophy. So anyway, but like I imagine that one way one could see that this kind of thing evolves is just by recognizing that that people tend to get along better with each other when decisions aren't being made, when one person is not forcing some action on another person. Meaning that you get some sort of social cohesion when like people feel like they all have a say, or they're all kind of getting the good end of the deal, and nobody like an example would be something like, you know, if we have a group of 10 people and then 2 of them, and we're trying to order food, right? Or okay, no, let's use like a properly evolutionary psychology example. Let's say that you have a community of 10 people, right? And it's known that 2 of them, they get sick when they eat I don't know, when they eat deer, right? They're allergic or something. But then the rest of the group just goes out and decides, oh, we're just gonna go hunt for deer tonight, and you're just gonna have to eat it or starve. Well, then those 2 people will either eat it, get sick, and then die, or starve and then die. And now you have a less successful community, right? And so I think that there's some sense of like self-determination that, or at least like implied self-determination, that can lead to a more successful and cohesive social group.
So
but I'd have to think about it more.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
No, you're fine.
Okay. Yeah. So I definitely see that. And in that scenario where it's like, you know, between deer and like, I don't know, a boar, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you have that decision like set open for you. And let's say that like hunting those 2 are like equally difficult, and you're equally like to get gored by like deer antlers and boar tusks. Let's say that calculus like evens out to be exactly the same, but that consent makes the difference in making the decision between the deer and the boar. It would make sense in that case, but consent seems to be a much stronger, it seems to be weighed a lot more stronger than that sort of calculus would indicate, right? Because
well,
like if it
so what I mean is that like that's the kind of example where you could see where you can see this kind of like evolutionary pressure towards caring about like other people, not, or caring about yourself or other people, not like not having things forced upon them. Like that's just like the kind of example that can show that this is a thing that could have some sort of like evolutionary pressure.
It could, like, yeah, for sure. This evolutionary pressure would exist, but you wouldn't expect it to be as strong as it appears in a lot of modern
by the
science.
way, I'm not actually so sure how strong our drive towards consent really is. I mean, obviously it's something I care about because, you know, I was raised to care about that, and, you know, I think it's valuable. And I imagine you do too, and most people I hope in the chat do. But like for a long time, and actually, slaves still exist, right? People would, you know, go have sex with people without their consent a lot in history. Like Genghis Khan did it, like a lot. So I don't actually know how intrinsic it is. Now, it might be like so it might be like, even though we value it a lot now, it might be more of a derived trait.
Right. Okay. What do you say that it's like derived from?
Some sort of like kind of like more primitive empathy, something like that.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, historically, that's definitely been the trend, right? Consent has not been weighed as much as it is now, right? Like rape has, like, it's like hugely like
it was pretty normal, actually.
Yeah. But you know, back then it was not so great. But the problem is that if you sort of discard with this a conception of liberty as like a human right, we very quickly devolve, or like it seems like it's hard to like slide or keep in place with regards to our particular like conception of it. And it seems like we would want to keep that, right? This conception of liberty as being this sort of maybe not immutable, but close to immutable human right that we should preserve.
Well, look, like, when people say human rights, like, I don't think that they're like these inalienable things, right? Like, I mean, they're very alienable, insofar as you can just move across country lines and your rights change, right? And so, like, the way that rights, like, as we view them, tend to be preserved is by continuity of government, typically. So if you have a state that has some enshrined rights, then those rights will probably stick around as long as that state does until the state collapses, right?
Right.
And so like fortunately, states being fairly large and organized hierarchies tend to be fairly stable, at least more stable than you might expect from a bunch of people who otherwise hate each other.
Yeah, for sure.
So like maybe so generally, if you want these things to stick around, then your goal should just be the preservation of whatever state has those things. And so you work to do that. And, you know, then you end up, if you have a whole bunch of people that care about it and a whole bunch of people in another state that don't care about it, and, you know, they're fighting over resources, then whichever one has people with bigger muscles wins. And that's, like, I'm a pragmatist about rights in that regard. Like, there are things that I care about, and I hope that those things stick around for a long time. But if somebody with bigger muscles comes and beats me up and takes my wife and steals my dog, then I'm just a sad boy, I guess. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Oh man, I mean, I guess so, but like that's a sort of okay. Let's first tackle like the first thing, right? Which you brought up. This rights are enshrined within the policies of states. That much is like, you know, certainly historically true, right? Like we might have conceived of these like natural rights during the Enlightenment, but without a government to sort of enforce them, they're kind of just like, you know, in the aether, right? They don't really exist. Sure, right? And that's true. But like states can change internally, right? And it seems to be the case that like, you know, early days of the US, when you had Thomas Jefferson and his, you know, man, like I don't even want to talk about it. Like Thomas Jefferson, and he was like kind of forced himself on his like slave, and then it seems to be like very. I don't know. Actually, wait, really?
I'm pretty sure it was. No, I'm pretty sure it wasn't. I'm pretty sure it was not consensual, right?
Right. Yeah, that seems to me my impression as well. But you know, so it seems like in the early U.S., well, we still have the same state. We didn't have the same sort of like level of value attributed to these like conceptions of like values of like consent and stuff, because we didn't view certain groups of people as people.
Yep.
But as soon as we stop like sort of like conceiving of like a internally consistent moral framework to justify these sorts of like values, like what stops a state from like internally backsliding and collapsing into like something like a Chinese sort of like utilitarian utilitarianism, where things like consent don't really matter, you know?
I don't think that the grounding for your framework like matters at all for any of this, right? What matters is whether or not the people in power care about certain things. And so like what, like, you know, you could have like I don't know where you lean politically, but like you could have the most like Christian slide into fascism, or you could have like the most atheist slide into fascism, or you can have like the most Christian socialist utopia, or you can have the most atheist, you know, libertarian utopia. Like the grounding for your morals seem to matter less than the actual position, like the actual moral positions of the people who have power.
Yeah, for sure. But then it comes to the point where it's like you need to come up with like a really like rock solid, watertight account for human rights from an atheist grounding, right? Like Christianity.
Why?
I wouldn't say
like in order to preserve human rights. Why do I need to do that?
I mean, I think we generally agree that like we both want it. We want that to happen, right? Like,
well, yeah. But why do I need a grounding in order to make that happen?
No. You don't need a grounding, right? Like, you need some sort of like reasoning from your grounding, from like a reductive materialist perspective. Like, how would you preserve them if you want to preserve them?
Oh, how would I preserve them? I would try to convince other people that they're good, that these are good things to hold, good positions to hold. If we live in a democracy.
If it's just an opinion, right? Like, what's the reasoning behind it? Like, it can't just be like a completely egoistic perspective. Otherwise, it would.
Wait, so what's the reason that I hold it, or what's the reason, or how would I convince other people to hold that position?
Like let's do both. Yeah.
So the reason I hold it is because I have certain values, and the way I got those values, who knows, but I have those values, and those values lead me to care about certain things like consent and, liberty and equality and things like that.
Yeah.
So like those are just what my values are, and we could try to come up with an account for where those values came from, and I'm probably pretty particularist about that. But how I would convince other people is I would just try to, whatever foundation they have for where they get their morals, I would try to appeal to that. And if they don't share the same morals with me, I would try to prevent them from having a say.
Okay. Interesting.
Like
So like
everybody's like, do you remember during the election? I assume you're American. Are you American?
yeah, I am.
Okay. Do you remember during the election, like everybody like on TikTok and YouTube and all social media, they were like, "Oh, go vote. I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but go vote." No, I will tell you how to vote. If you're going to vote for the guy I don't like, don't vote. Like, why would I want you to vote if you're going to vote for somebody I don't like?
Okay, yeah. I mean, I guess that's fair. So like, let's just coming back to like the convincing aspect of it. Like, let's say that you meet like a fellow reductive materialist, right? And let's say that he is like pretty hardcore sort of against human rights, but he is willing to have his mind changed, right? He believes like he's a purely act utilitarian. He believes that within like a hospital, like you go in, they should like slaughter you immediately to save however many people, right? Like, how would you sort of give this account of human rights to this person?
So, I mean, I think that I would probably, it depends on how rational the person is, right? Like, I think it really depends on the person. But like in this case, like I think that this is probably generally the case, is that like the way that you convince people of these kinds of things are appeals to emotion rather than like appeal to like pure reason and like logic, right? Because most people like moral positions are like, as much as people make fun of Alex O'Connor for his like emotivist position, like emotions, and I know that's completely unrelated, but like emotions are really the driving factor for a lot of emotional views.
Yeah, sure.
In that like something just feels wrong, right? And like we just have like this very deep intuition that something is wrong.
Right.
And so, but you know, if he couldn't extend empathy for whatever reason, sorry, I'm getting over a cold. If he couldn't extend empathy for whatever reason, then I'd be like, you know what? You're right that I guess we'll never agree. And did you know that they actually changed the voting day from the first Thursday of November to the second Thursday? I would just lie to him and try to convince him not to have a say.
Okay. Well, it's funny, right? Like, let's just say that this person is like really rational. Let's say this person is like educated and perfectly, like, not super like particularly like grounded in any sort of axiomatic commitments that would sort of like lead him away from this sort of position. Like, let's say that he is willing to be like convinced, but the thing is, like, his position from a utilitarian perspective is pretty strong, right? Like, he would say, why don't you extend empathy to those 5 people who, like, you know, within the next 2 hours, if they don't get an organ transplant, their families and so on and so forth, like, 5 families will grieve the loss versus 1, right? Like, an argument from empathy, like, it kind of can be reversed onto you, right?
Yeah. So look, the point I'm making is that I don't think that I think that generally speaking, people are not like, I didn't rationally arrive at my like the values that I have, right? Like I generally I don't think anybody is. And so I don't think that there's like a rational argument for why I can, like, I don't think I could convince somebody with some rational argument, like with no with like no preconceptions about something, that like if they don't believe that like murder is bad, I don't think that I could rationally convince them that it is. Like I would have to appeal to like, you know, some shared values that we might have, for example. And like,
okay.
I mean, like I have this value that, like, you know, consent is important, and that value seems to be even in some cases overriding like survival and things like that. So why I have that value is a question that is like I don't know why. I don't know why I have that value. It's just a value I have, and it seems to be pretty unchanging. That I haven't changed that position my whole life as far as I'm aware. And so like I just wouldn't be able to convince that person. I don't think anybody really could. At least like not genuinely.
I mean, interesting, right? But like the thing is like if you, as soon as you start believing, right? Like regardless of the ontology of this like objective moral grounding, like as soon as you start believing in it, you behave as if it exists, right? And as soon as
Start
that
believing in
happens,
what?
like it's some sort of objective moral grounding.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Oh well,
And
not
then
necessarily, right? Like,
interesting. Okay.
I mean, like there are people who like believe in objective moral, like believe in an objective moral framework, and then are still like still act as if there is no such thing because they act horribly. Right? There's still evil people who believe in objective morals. I imagine, like,
Interesting.
right? Like, there's got to be, right?
I mean,
Like, it's
I mean, maybe like I tend to take a sort of like a platonic view of things. Maybe like generally a platonic view of things. Like if you think that like an action, if you know that an action is morally wrong, right? Like it would take a huge amount of effort to like sort of contrive your way into like achieving that action. I feel like it would
oh, I think
take
I
some
agree with
level
that.
of ignorance. Yeah.
But like,
It
okay,
takes some
so
level of ignorance to bring yourself to like commit a genocide. Like
so
bringing
would
it
you
back
just
to
say
RC
that
or whatever.
people who believe, like, because there are people who are like ostensibly Christians, like, you know, very well-known Christians, who nonetheless
Yeah.
are like bad people.
Yeah.
And yet in principle they share the same objective moral framework as like the majority of Christians, where, you know, like stealing is bad and, you know, give to the needy and all these things, but they still do the other things. So like, is this just them like mistakenly interpreting the framework that they say they believe in?
I mean, it's kind of seems to be the case. Like, how would they internally justify their actions? Or do
Yeah,
they
I have
just
no
like
idea.
completely separate it off? Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could also have like some sort of compartmentalization, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, like the trope of like the Italian mobster who's like, you know, work is work, but then I go to confession after.
Yeah, Tony Soprano. Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just don't think that. I don't know.
Now,
It just
but
seems
by
like
the
a-
way, if your position is that if you want to convince people to adopt your moral framework, telling them that there is an objective moral truth is a good way to do that, that might be true. And so, in fact, maybe that's why we have religion, right? To convince people to believe that your views are the right views. But I don't know if that actually, and I mean, again, I don't know if that actually means that there is an objective moral framework. It just means that believing in one is good for convincing people or good for social cohesion or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, yeah. It just seems to me like this sort of framework or like the sort of like belief. I just find trouble believing the fact that like rational actors can act against their own belief systems. It seems like kind of absurd to me. You know what I mean?
I mean, and like in the context of like somebody being like a bad person, even with respect to their own like their own believed objective system.
Yeah, I mean, it would just be like not like it comes back to like rationality, right? Like Kant.
Yeah,
Right?
maybe they
Kant
couldn't.
would give, yeah.
Maybe you're right. Maybe the people who like do this sort of compartmentalization, maybe they're not. Maybe those people don't actually exist. But I mean, like, yeah, I guess I guess I was just trying to zoom out and be like, like you may very well be just correct that like, yeah, people who believe in an objective moral framework have a very easy time have a very easy time. No, what am I trying to say? It's easy to justify to other people things like human rights if you have an objective moral framework that you believe in. I agree that
Right.
it's definitely easy to make that justification, because if you can convince them that there is that objective moral framework, then now you both have a shared reference, and now you can say, ah, well, from that framework we can derive X, Y, Z, and therefore we get, X, Y, Z human right.
Hmm.
But that's an appeal that's an appeal to the practicality of belief, which I'm willing to grant that some beliefs are absolutely practical.
Yeah, it just seems like as soon as you start sort of like advocating for this position of like sort of like I don't even know what I'm trying to say completely here, but like if you start advocating for this position, right, or if you start subscribing to this position, it seems like any moral project is like doomed to fail from the beginning. Like, doesn't even matter like the rationality of these different actors in the scenario. Like, there's no convincing anyone if it's just purely based on experiential or like gene expressed things, you know?
I mean, maybe you're right. Again, I mean, like, let's say that that's true. That's an argument for why we should believe that something is true, not why something is true.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
And you may
sorry.
very well be right. I mean, like, look, humans have been wildly successful as a species, and perhaps one of the reasons we've done that is because we've had very cohesive societies, generally speaking, and those societies all tend to be pretty well focused around like religious and spiritual beliefs. So maybe that's why we've been so successful. Who knows?
Yeah, but like it just doesn't seem apparent to me. Like, in some sense, these values that we hold are, in certain scenarios, like contradictory, or like they run against this like uh, cohesive sort of like evolutionary pressure, right? Like, why aren't we all ants, or why aren't we all like, I don't know, pack animals like hyenas that have like a very strict what I'm trying to say is like, why aren't we like other pack animals where consent really doesn't seem to matter at all?
So I actually think that there are examples of consent in the animal kingdom, and I can double check that for you.
Yeah.
Um, the,
I mean, I know there's like a duck thing, right? Like that.
well, yeah, but
Uh,
that's
yeah.
not like a social like that's not like a social pressure, like a social pressure against against like rape or whatever. That's like an evolutionary thing. But like I remember reading, I think it was like some primate species that like gets really mad when like things are taken from okay, so it's not the same as like sexual consent, of course, but like when somebody takes like when somebody steals something, like they get upset and they have like social ramifications. Like like if one, I don't think it was chimps, but if one chimp stole like the melon from another chimp while he wasn't looking, and then gets caught, like the rest of the social group will like shun him or whatever. And
Mm.
that's like a type of consent where a thing was taken without without against the desires of another one, right? It's not like the same as sexual consent, but it's a similar kind of idea.
Sure, right? And I guess that would like sort of make sense. Regarding chimps, like I thought there was like this interesting thing where because somewhat off topic, but if you like, apparently there was like some zoo, right? Maybe it was like the San Diego Zoo, but they trained chimps to like paint, and it turned out that if you like took away a painting before they thought they were done painting it, they would get like angry. I thought that was just a fun
Yeah,
fact.
yeah. The chimps are like a lot, and they have like a sense of fairness too. Like
Mhm.
if you give two chimps one banana each, they'll both be fine. But then if you give two chimps that are in the same room, if you give one of the chimps two bananas and then the other one three bananas, the one with two bananas will be mad because they're like, why did
Yeah.
that one get more?
Right. Yeah, but then this doesn't even like seem to necessarily like run counter to my sort of argument, right? But it seems to be the case that like at a certain stage of cognitive evolutionary development, we develop these things that seem to run counter to values like group cohesion, right? Like in fairness, right? Like if you have like two equally fair chimps and then you give one two and then the other one one, right? Like it would, them getting angry at like the provider of bananas, it kind of like goes against social cohesion. Like, why do these things arise?
Yeah, I mean the question of like why like fairness and justice arises. Well, I mean you like again, I could probably come up with some sort of just so story that you know, and it's not really a just so story. It's just kind of speculation that like when things are imbalanced, then the one that is getting the short. Sorry, God, I should probably end the live like maybe an hour or something. The one that got the short end of the stick will be less likely to be interested in remaining with the group because it's not getting it's not getting the nutritions that it needs or whatever, and so you have a less tight knit community or whatever. These kinds of things. But like the point is that I think that like generally it's easy to come up with explanations like evolutionarily explanations that are at least plausible for these kinds of things.
Yeah. And
for these kind of like fundamental ideas.
Right? Yeah.
And like again, we can only really do this for like these very, very rudimentary like moral things like just like not even justice, like fairness. Like anything more than like fairness is like probably too sophisticated for psychology to account for.
Yeah, and like you say, like all these explanations are at the very least plausible, right? Like maybe they wouldn't be expected, but under your framework, they can certainly be explained away. But then, why wouldn't such principles apply to like, sort of like, let's say animals that are lower level on the cognitive scale, right? Like we don't see a conception of fairness within ants, right? Like that's just not something that we observe. But then like as we like move up in terms of like complexity, like maybe we see it in canines, like wolf packs, but then we definitely see it in chimps and we definitely see it in human societies. Like why does this happen?
So I mean,
why does this apply at one scale but not the other?
So in one sense, like it's for the sort of obvious reason that like in order for psychological traits to evolve, you need a psychology, right? And so like ants, if they have a psychology, it's not a very sophisticated one, right?
Yeah.
But like all things considered, ants are actually like wildly social. Like in some sense, they do have a sense of morality. It's just kind of like instinctual rather than like some sort of psychological thing. Like they will metaphorically jump on the grenade to save their queen, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, I think it's actually like ants are a really interesting example because, in some like in that sense they're like more moral than we are. Like they like self-sacrifice at like the drop of a hat, and that's just because they're like a more social species than we are. And I think that there's like in fact you may even be able to like kind of see a sliding scale of like how moral, how like how selfless a species is based off of how social that species is. Like humans are very, very social, but ants are so even more so. So like there's like, and then like big cat families, they are like sort of social. They live in like small family groups, but they're not like as social. And so like they might not have as many issues with like a mom eating the baby cubs or whatever, right?
Right. Yeah.
So like this whole thing of like maybe it is actually super expected that like the sophisticated stuff, the stuff that actually requires psychology, like yeah, you're only going to see that in things that have psychology, but like you might still see some sense of like moral, like some moral features in social species.
Right. But I guess I would sort of distinguish some base human like moral intuitions with the sort of, I'm not sure if I would even call it morality, right? Like what do you call it moral if you decided to like drink clean water rather than like dirty water? Like I'm not sure if that's moral. Like what I'm trying to say is that this seems to be just like a completely like evolution based sort of like framework, right? Like in the case of ants, they're just like kind of one super organism, right? Like I'm not sure if it's moral for a killer T cell to like sacrifice itself to
Yeah,
like
I see.
yeah,
Yeah, I see what you mean.
right.
Like, well, I don't think it's actually correct to say that it's like one superorganism. I think that was like a belief that was like a fairly old belief, but like now we recognize that like
Okay.
the individual ants are actually they are far more individual than we gave them credit for. But I mean, like it's definitely not like morals in the sense that you and I have, because they just don't have a psychology, right? They don't have like the ability to like. I don't think that ants can feel disgust or joy or pleasure, or I don't think that they have the capacity, just like the subjective capacity to have those experiences.
Right.
To like and those seem at least important for making moral assessments. So so like, yeah, I mean, maybe it's not a form of morality, but at least it's something like akin to morality, this sense of like protecting the social group and things like that you can at least see might be related to the fact that we have similar traits, if more sophisticated, and we are also a social species.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that. Like, they are definitely analogous. I would love to see some of the stuff that like points to ants being more individual than
Yeah, I read about it.
us
Like I read
humans,
about
per
it
se.
a while ago. I'd have to like I could not pull it up on like on command, but I could definitely look into it after my live's over, if I remember.
That'd be
If
awesome.
you want to
Yeah.
like I don't know how you DM me on YouTube.
I think it was on TikTok. Yeah. Sure. But like going past that, right? Like it seems to be the case. Like under this sort of framework, you would just sort of like there's no justification as to why we shouldn't collapse into sort of like that ant framework in which the individual has like no sort of or like functionally has no autonomy at all, because it would be better for group cohesion, right? Like why don't we
Well,
just become a
why
superorganism?
don't because I think the point is that like there's a sliding scale of well, okay, so why don't we? Well, we only evolved to be this way, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so like there is a certain state of affairs for humans, and so humans aren't really going to change psychologically that significantly as a result of like mere social interactions. Like if I'm right that this is like an an evolved psychological trait, then that takes evolutionary timescales to change, right?
Mm,
And so it's just something that won't change because of human biology. But if you're asking like why did we evolve this way instead of like like an even more selfless way like ants, well, I mean, who knows? It could be because we're less social than they are, and so there's like we live in smaller groups, and so these kinds of like this kind of like diminishing value of the individual is like in some sense like the more social a species you are, the less valuable the individual is, because like if you have like a billion individuals in your community, then like in your like your local community, then like one individual, it's just not really important if they survive. But if you only have like 30 individuals in your community, then like one individual surviving is kind of like important. And so you could
right.
see that like you would care more about, or you would be slightly less willing to just jump on the grenade because your friend stubbed their toe, right?
Mm,
Like
okay.
the I guess a better example would be something like an ant. If the queen had a 1% chance of dying from, I don't know, something that a single ant could throw itself in front of to prevent, it probably would, because losing one single ant to prevent a 1% chance of the queen dying, that's a good trade-off. But if you only have 30
Right.
people in your small community, and like there's your chieftain or whatever, and there's 1% chance that this elephant or whatever is going to come gore your chieftain. There's a 1% chance of that
Okay.
happening, and so you go out and
Right.
you go fight the elephant, and you have like a 90% chance of dying. Like that's stupid. Like that's just not like the math just doesn't math. So like
Yeah.
it would kind of check out that like we have smaller communities, so we would be less selfless.
Okay. I see what you're saying, but I think it kind of goes back to like the sort of conversation that I had with my friend who lives in mainland China, right? Because it seems to be the case that states can sort of impose these sort of like purely utilitarian social frameworks onto people, and it seems to be the case that you know uh, they are more, in a sense, like Darwinistically competitive, right? Like if you have a government that doesn't really care about consent and purely focuses on like let's say economic or political goals, right? And they don't care about rights, they would be much more efficient in pursuing those things. But uh, it seems to be the case that we have some sort of like natural inbuilt thing that turns us away from this, right? Maybe it's gene expression, maybe
I
not.
don't know if that's true,
But
actually. Like, I really don't know if that's true, because for the vast majority of human history, we had monarchs, right?
right,
So, like, I actually don't think that there's this inbuilt thing that, like, yes, we have a tendency towards liberal democracy. Like, liberal democracy is, like, 300 years old.
okay, yeah,
And it's
but
not even everywhere on Earth, right? It's like, in, like, half, maybe.
right, yeah. And sure, in that sense, though, like, would you say that? Okay, from my experience, and this is, I apologize, all I have is anecdotal data to support this claim. But from my experience, most of the people that I meet seem to have this sort of like value of, if not consent, like at large, right, which would like turn into a liberal democracy. They seem to have a sort of like a value for individual consent, right? Like, and again, it's like, why don't we just like bury this under our like layers of rationality and then just turn into ants, right? Because it seems to be like more socially cohesive or efficient in some, you know, geopolitical sense.
Well, why don't we? Because we're not purely rational beings, and we have, the psychology that we have. But, like, I mean, I agree that probably, actually, I mean, it's not like most people that you meet today in, like, developed parts of the world, places that have a reasonable income where they have enough time that they can think about, like, consent, because, I'm dying. The idea of consent is like unfortunately it's one of these things that like it's just not something people really care about until they like have their meals handled.
Okay.
I mean like that's just like a fact of the matter, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like it is it's unfortunate, but it is a fact of the matter.
Right.
If you ask anybody in America or anybody in in China or in anywhere in Europe or in a lot of places in Africa, a lot of places in South America, but not everywhere in these kind of less developed areas. They will have like a well-developed notion of consent because like they're taken care of like from like a food perspective, food and shelter and all these things, and so and that's true for like this kind of like personal notion of consent. Like oh yeah, like it would be really good if people didn't like run around and like assault people. But that I don't think that translates at all to like large scale policy, right?
Right.
Because like I think generally speaking, like I think that notion of consent, at least insofar as it applies to like the in group of whatever you're talking about, right? Like if you're if you're a European man in the 1500s, the consent that you care about is the consent of other white men, right?
Yeah.
So like as long as like insofar as that group is being talked about, then yeah, consent still mattered. But like that didn't mean that they didn't like having kings.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know.
And by the way, I think that there is a certain extent where there's like tension here, right? Because like on the one hand,
Right.
humans like consent. Humans like, and you could think of this like almost empathetically. Like, I don't want people to take away my choices. So it's reasonable to think that I shouldn't take away other people's choices. Um, there's that, But on the other hand, humans also tend to like hierarchy, and those things can be in conflict, right? And so where you land is just how much you value one thing over the other. And I could see that like fluctuating based on culture. Like some cultures might value hierarchy more than they care about like kind of large scale consent, and other societies might value large scale consent more than they care about hierarchy. So,
Man, I don't know. I think about this. I don't know. Are you familiar with the Overthink podcast?
the Overthink podcast, I'm not.
Okay. Well, they had like this episode on like disagreement, and it seemed to be the case that for like fundamental disagreements in worldview, it seems to be the case that like to like call them like rational actors, call them like willing to be convinced of like any particular conclusion. They always bring like particular like axiomatic commitments into the discussion, from a hermeneutical perspective, you always have some sort of framework that you have to like filter your interpretation of reality through. It feels like,
Sure.
I don't know, with your particular like framework, it seems to be like just such a on one hand, it's like from judging from my framework, it seems to be like kind of a hopeless sort of worldview, and on the like a second one, it's practically speaking, I'm not sure how you would preserve certain things that we would like intuitively consider to be valuable, like liberty.
Well, so I mean, hopeless maybe. Maybe. How we preserve it is the same way that you would. You would try to convince people based off of whatever they believe, right? I mean, you'd appeal to what they believe, and you would try to, using what they believe, you would try to come up with a way to produce an entailment to the things that you want to be true, or to the things that you hold valuable. That's how we convince people of things in general, right?
Man.
And if you can't do that, then you fight them.
Okay, yeah. Hopefully we have the bigger muscles.
Yeah, right. Well, unfortunately, I don't have the bigger muscles, so I have to fight them with brain or something.
Nah, you've got a big brain, Dr.
Thanks,
Blitz.
bud.
But okay,
All right.
wait. Yeah, another point. Okay, sorry.
It's got to be quick because I got to let you go soon.
Oh yeah, sorry. But like,
You're
it
good.
seems to be the case that like you get bigger muscles if you subscribe to certain like morally non-intuitive positions that seem to optimize.
So by the way, you also get bigger muscles if you subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Yeah,
for everybody
subscribe.
listening, you get bigger muscles. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. But like, if you purely focus on like, if you override these sort of like seemingly natural intuitions about consent and liberty and all other natural rights, you seem to have like bigger muscle. You get bigger muscles more quickly if you focus on efficiency, right? Like, what do you agree?
Yeah. So one of the biggest like there's been this harsh turn towards like authoritarianism in the U.S. Like
sure.
not even, and it's not even like quiet for a lot of people anymore. And they're like, yeah, you know what? Maybe monarchy is good because at least they get stuff done quickly, and like it's definitely an advantage. Absolutely.
Gosh, yeah. Right. Oh man. I don't know. I'm just not sure if I can live like that, man. All right.
I mean, like, look, I'm not fond of authoritarianism either. But like there are definitely some advantages, and that's why I said like there are tensions here. Like hierarchy, authoritarianism is just a very strong hierarchy, right? Hierarchies are really efficient for getting the job done and for achieving ends quickly. The more flat your hierarchy is, the longer it takes to solve problems.
Yeah. There's this interesting property in like American indigenous societies that they're like much more directly democratic because their groups are much smaller, right? Like this administrative burden is like you can lessen it with like a very strict hierarchies, but that's not necessary when you have a tribe of 20.
Yeah, that's true.
It's I don't know. I think that sounds pretty good, man. Like, I don't know.
Small, yeah. So you mean small societies that live communally?
Yeah.
It does sound good. You're right.
Yeah,
it does sound good. You're right.
We should live on a commune, Dr. Blitz.
I'm down. I'm down. Almost
right.
Like you could call me well, somebody who likes communes. You might call them a communist.
Oh man, I kid. Nah. Low key. All right.
Loki, maybe? All right,
Yeah.
Andy, I'm going to let you go, but thanks for being here, bud.
Okay. Yeah. You have a good day. Thank you. Get
Take
well
care.
soon, by the way.
Thanks. What a delightful person. I know that was boring for you guys, but he was a delightful person. All right, let's move on to the next guest from TikTok. All right, who do we got? Let's talk to Mr. Steal Yo Bitch. Is there still a volume difference? Hopefully not. Audio test, 1, 2, 3. All right, this person's not connecting. Oh, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube or on TikTok, make sure to follow, subscribe, all these lovely things. And if you want to support me, there's a Cash App and buy me a coffee link if the Cash App doesn't work in the description or in the link tree in my bio and a whole bunch of different places you can see these things. So make sure to check those out if you want to support me. If you don't, that's cool too. But make sure to join the Discord. You sent me a coffee this week. Thank you, Lou. I appreciate you. Make sure to join the Discord if you haven't. X Chromosome, how's it going?
Yeah, how's it going? I'm actually an atheist. I just wanted to ask you a question about something. That's fine.
Sure, but it's got to be quick.
Yeah, very quick. So, what is your opinion on like the argument for motion?
The argument from motion? Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
convinced that there's a first mover.
So usually when they lay it out, they try and say something like things can't go from like potential to actual on their own, and then they'll say there can't be like an infinite regress of things that like go from potential to actual. So like which part do you usually like disagree with? What would
I
be,
don't
like,
I don't think that there's any issue with infinite regresses.
Okay. Yeah, that's all I had.
All right, thanks for being here. All right, let's bring up another guest. Come on, TikTok, you can do your thing. All right, let's talk to Fuff. Fuff, how's it going?
Okay, good. So, I'm not like, I guess, Christian or like any of the main religions. My belief is just like that there's, like the universe, I guess, is, you could say like an organism or whatever, and we're just like the universe experiencing itself.
Okay, so, but do you believe in a god?
Yeah, like the universe is that God.
But I believe in the universe too, so it sounds like you're an atheist with extra steps.
What would be your definition of a God? Because like,
A god, I
mine
would
is,
define a god as a supernatural being that is responsible for creating and maybe sustaining all of physical reality.
so wouldn't that be the universe?
The universe isn't a supernatural being.
Mm, I mean, yeah, we can't explain it, but yeah, I guess that is, I don't know.
It's kind of
That
by
would be,
definition physical, right?
I mean, it's just we can't explain it. Oh, well, yeah, that was just my interpretation of life. Yeah, just like
Okay.
life is the universe experiencing itself.
Well, I agree with you.
I just want to. Oh, okay, well, okay, no.
It just sounds like
came up.
atheism.
Oh, okay. I
Why
just kind
was-
of came up with that myself, and I was like testing it out. But yeah, that was my thing. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. The volume on the stream is really quiet. That's strange. It shouldn't be. Is it better now? Is the audio okay? Test. Audio test on YouTube. Oh, the guest was quiet. Okay, that I will take into account. I'll take a look. Nate, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing? Can you hear me?
I'm doing all right. What do you believe? Which god?
Well, I'm not an atheist, but I do believe in God. But kind of like the last guest said, I
Well,
believe
but
God
which
is the
one?
universe. So, God is the universe. However, I don't think your definition of God necessarily stands on its own. Being God is a supernatural being.
Okay, well that's what I mean when I say it. So if we just have a difference of language, then I don't know if we have a difference of substance.
Well, no, I don't think you think the universe has consciousness.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Well, it contains consciousness, but
why wouldn't it be conscious in itself?
well, I mean, I just don't really have any reason to think that it is. Right? I think the default state of things is not being conscious.
Yeah, but following logical, like if you follow the logical trail, like if you extrapolate, consciousness comes from, you know, a complex set of like neural structure, right? So
Yeah, at least it seems to, sure.
I mean, why wouldn't a universe then have consciousness? It would be the ultimate complex set of a neural network.
I don't know if the universe is a neural network.
I mean, what it like? It's hard. Yeah, you're not giving me much to argue on. You're just saying, I don't. It can't be.
Well,
but,
you're the one who's going to try to convince me of this, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to. How is it that you have consciousness?
Well, I
mean,
think
you're not.
that my brain is a pretty sophisticated neural network, right?
Yeah, but is that what it takes? I mean, you're not very complex.
I mean,
brains
really, are pretty complex. Brains are arguably the most complex things in the observable universe.
No. There's so many. No, they're so tiny and like.
Small doesn't mean not complex.
Yeah, but compared to what's out there in the universe, like.
Well, what's out there most of the stuff in the universe is balls of gas, and then balls of dust.
And we're just balls of organic matter.
Arranged in a very complicated way.
Yeah, we're like, so we can only see the universe from our perspective. Like we're looking at neither a macroscopic nor a microscopic view, right? We're looking at it from one perspective, but
yeah,
imagine looking at the universe in a more macroscopic view. You know, it would seem like a much more complex, like it would seem like a brain, right? If you were to zoom out from it, don't you think
I don't know
it would
if
look
it would seem like a brain? Why would it seem like a brain?
I mean, it has the same structure as like organic material. It has like cells and like
a cell isn't. What do you mean it has cells?
It has like cell kind of structures, you know, like
Why would it seem like a brain?
I mean, it has the same structure as like organic material. It has like cells. Reverberation.
Sorry?
Are you getting reverberation? Because I'm hearing
yeah, sorry about that. I don't know why you're able to hear that. I was just doing an audio test. But like, why do you think that the universe like has cells?
Well, I'm saying if you look at it from macroscopic, if you zoom out, like if you were to look at our cells very like from this perspective of cells, it wouldn't look like cells. It would just look like a solar system or something like that. But if you're to zoom out,
no, cells don't look like solar systems.
If like from our perspective, no. But they follow the same structure.
What?
Like everything. If you go down further, like you look at like a nucleus, right?
Yeah.
There's like if you look at go down to the molecular structure. There's like protons surround, orbiting around the nucleus and things like that. So if you zoom in close enough, it resembles parts of the. It looks like the universe from our perspective now.
It doesn't at all. The version of the atom that you're referring to is like 100 years out of date.
But the atom has changed in 100 years?
Yeah, the idea that an atom is just a proton and then electrons going around in circles, that's not what atoms are, and it hasn't been. Nobody's thought that that's what atoms are for like 100 years.
So nobody thinks there's a nucleus surrounded by being orbited.
Yes, yeah, electrons don't orbit.
how am I so misinformed about that? Isn't there a
Because they
nucleus?
teach it in high school.
Isn't there a nucleus with things orbiting it?
No, nothing orbit.
Proton-
There's
protons
something
and
called an
neutrons.
electron probability cloud that hangs out around the nucleus.
I mean, we can't really see that, right? We're just guessing that.
No, actually, we can see it with like with modern scanning tunneling electron microscopy, which is really cool.
So we can see that there's. When you say probability cloud, I think what you're saying is, I'm guessing what you're saying is that there is a proton somewhere in space
Electron.
around the nucleus,
Yep.
an electron somewhere in space around the nucleus at any given time, and the probability is it's in one of the orbital positions at any time you look at it.
Well,
So
it's not like it's not like in a circle, right? It'd be like a sphere, or like lobes. But yeah.
Okay, so it's in an orbital position around the nucleus. So it's in different positions in orbit around the nucleus. Maybe it doesn't follow a regular path.
Yep.
Okay, so sort of like, not exactly like a solar system, but sort of like it, a nucleus being surrounded by orbitals.
Except they don't orbit, right?
Well, how do they move around it? They move around it. They
The
orbit.
cloud is static. The cloud doesn't change, and that's what the electron is.
The electrons move in different positions around it. The probability indicates that they're in different positions around the nucleus. at some point.
The electron is the probability cloud.
Yeah, but the probability means it's not in the same place all the time.
The probability cloud tells you where you would find it if you tried to measure its position.
Yeah, so what is it, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle that keeps us from measuring the position of it?
You can measure the position, and then if you
But not
look
the
away
movement.
and you wait long enough, and then you measure the position again, it'll be in a different place.
Yeah, that's an orbit. I'm
But
saying
it's not
doesn't
or-
follow-
it-
it's not a
it's
regular
not, it's not like
orbital
some orb. It's not like some orbital thing. Like it's basically random.
Right, it's not a regular orbital path, but it's in orbit around it. It has to move from one position to another. It can't like quantumly jump from one position to another.
It
has to-
literally can, by the way.
Okay, that's a different discussion.
It's literally called a quantum jump.
That's another discussion, but it has to go from point A to point B, and it's not going through hyperspace to get there. It's moving kinetically around the nucleus.
You're thinking of electrons like tiny little balls. They're not that.
Yeah. What are you saying they are?
They are the probability cloud. That's what they are.
So it's a ball, but the probability cloud is all the different probable
No.
positions.
The
All
electron
could be-
is the probability cloud.
So it's a matter of cloud. So it's different. It's a bunch of particles. So an electron is a bunch of particles.
No. The single electron particle is the cloud.
Yeah. So it's a particle.
It's not an electron is not a tiny ball. It's a probability.
It's a particle.
That's what an electron is.
An electron is a particle.
An electron is and what a particle is a probability cloud.
Yeah. So the particle, when you stop to measure it, it's not a cloud anymore. It's a particle.
No, it's just the cloud localizes when you make a measurement.
Yeah. So the probability cloud is the particle at an unmeasured position where it probably is. And when you measure it, it's at a located point. So it's now a particle. When you measure it, when that probability cloud collapses, the electron is a particle.
It's a particle.
measure-
Anyway, the whole point being is that this is wildly different from like planets orbiting a sun.
No, yeah, it may seem that way. I'm saying it's from our macro perspective, but if you zoom down closer, if you're looking at it from its perspective, it's probably similar to what we're looking at when we look at a solar system. I'm just saying it's a matter of perspective. Now, if we were to zoom way out, imagine like zooming on an iPad or something, zoom way out. These solar systems might look like cells or something like that. And I'm saying they're more complex than cells. So if you can infinitely zoom out, and it's hard to think about infinity, but if we can infinitely zoom out, well, what are we looking at? I mean, at some point we're looking at like, something way more complex than a human brain.
I don't.
Way more
Should I
complex.
believe that?
Just follow the logical progression. There's a logical progression.
What's the inference? Where's I don't see. I didn't see any logic in that chain of
because
thinking.
yeah, well, because you're not thinking of infinity, right? As something that
I don't think that was the
think
issue.
It's you don't think of infinity as something that as something we can observe, because we can't observe it. So it's hard to think from another perspective. So, anyway, that's just to get to the point to where the universe could physically resemble our human brain, but does it need to have consciousness? Does it need to resemble our human brain?
Not necessarily, but I just don't know why I would believe the universe is conscious.
So you think humans are the highest consciousness in the universe?
No, I didn't say that.
So there could be something with a higher consciousness than us.
Yeah, there could be aliens with brains the size of, I don't know, elephants. And their consciousness is way better than ours.
Is it probable?
I don't know. I can't make that probabilistic assessment.
Okay. Well, it's a probabilistic cloud that there is.
Get out of here.
Get
out of here. Go on. You make one joke and you're gone. By the way, I'll remember to like the live. All right, let's talk to... I feel like I've spoken with Phantom Duck before. Duck, how's it going?
We've talked before, and I love being on your lives.
Well, I appreciate that. What are we talking about?
Okay, on prompt, you're an atheist, God isn't real. I have God under a framework of non-consciousness and being an event.
Event?
The Big Bang.
Oh, okay, yeah, so that's compatible with atheism, so...
I mean...
I may as well just be an atheist still, I guess.
Oh, I have, I should say, refined my belief a lot more since last time we talked. If you remember, I was simulation theory, so...
I don't really remember. But if your position is that God is the Big Bang, then, like, okay.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm
then,
at.
Yeah, then you got me. I believe in your God.
The other confusing one is I love to mess with people like, oh, Christianity, what is your God? Is your God sentient? Yes and no, because my God is the Big Bang, but that God is then made by us at a higher technological level.
Get out of here. We don't need none of this. What? Where do all the Christians go? I want to talk to a Christian that has, like, well-defined beliefs. I know where they are. They're all in Ian's guest box.
Hello?
Hutch, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Doing all right. Which God do you believe in?
So I'm actually a Muslim, but I do believe in a lot of the... So it's a little bit similar to Christianity, actually, but...
It's fine. I'm happy to talk to Muslims, too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just most of the people that watch these things are Christian because we're in the Western world. Anyway, yeah. So, what do you believe specifically, and what are you going to try to convince me of?
So I don't think I can fully prove to you that God exists. I don't think there's a physical...
That's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking you to convince me to believe in your God.
Exactly. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So essentially in Islam, we believe that humanity was created. Adam originally was in heaven. After he sinned, he was sent down to earth. And then we believe that God promised to send messengers and signs down to humanity. And then those who would believe in those, they would be saved. So we believe that Muhammad obviously was the last of those messengers, but we also believe that Jesus was also like a messenger.
Okay, sure. So why should I believe that? Why should I believe any of this?
Okay, so firstly, I'll probably begin with like Christianity, like, because in my opinion, like the fact that a single man like Jesus Christ, he came and within 3 years he had teachings that were so meaningful and powerful that with just 12 disciples, he was able to convert pretty much the entire Roman Empire to Christianity. Like all
it
12.
did take a few hundred years, right?
Yeah, but the main kickstarters were the 12 original disciples. Like one of them traveled to like India, one of them went to Rome, all of them being crucified for what they believed in. But my point is they believed so deeply in that message that they were willing to die for what they believed in.
Were they?
And that, yeah, all
Which
12
ones?
disciples, Peter, Mark, I don't know all of their names, but I do know they all.
How do you know
were
they all died for that belief?
because they were spreading the gospel, right?
Well, but
It-
how do you
it's-
know that they
it's-
died for that belief? Like, how do you know that they died for it at all? Like, maybe they died of old age.
It is in the historical records.
Which
I mean,
ones?
obviously, if you want me to prove it, I won't be able to.
So I'll
It's-
give you a hint. As far as I know, there's like 2 or 3 sources for like, or there's evidence, like there's like historical evidence for like 2 or 3 of the disciples being executed.
Okay, but even still, 2 or 3, like
And
2 or
for
3
what it's
men
worth,
willing to
we don't
die
even know
for that.
why they were executed. Just that they were.
Yeah. Okay, but most of my like research, like what I've learned is that they were executed for trying to basically preach the gospel
So
of Jesus
so
Christ.
that's Christian tradition, like that's church tradition. That's what like that's like the story that like has been passed down by the church for generations. But like there's not really like source for this. There's not really like
Okay, but
historical
anyways,
source for this.
I'm a Muslim, so even if that, like, if they were or were not crucified, my main point was the fact that in history there have been people that existed that were willing to die for what they believed in.
Absolutely.
And the only instances where I personally like see it in history, like where a person who claims to be a messenger or prophet, and then as a result, people have such a deep conviction, would be either with Jesus Christ or the companions of Muhammad, peace be upon him. Because also with the companions of Muhammad, peace be upon him, he also had companions that were willing to die for what they believed in. For example, like one of his messengers, like the messengers of the Prophet Muhammad, he went to the Byzantine Empire just to convey the message of Islam, and they essentially tied up his companions, and they started beating him, and he didn't care. He said, "I will be rewarded by God for this." So
I'm sure he
said,
believed
in
it,
fact,
yeah.
he had such a deep level of conviction that it's one thing to believe on a conscious level, but to believe on like a subconscious level that you're so convinced that you're willing to die for it. And
So-
like he continuously, like he said, if I would die like 70 times for this.
Have you heard of the Branch Davidians?
I have not.
They were a cult in like the late, I think the late 80s, early 90s. Oh no, I'm sorry. They were founded in the 50s. And they were a doomsday cult. And they ended up in 1993. This is a really, really famous hold on, sorry, I have to ban somebody. This is a really, really famous case because they got into a shootout with, I think, the FBI. No, it was the ATF. And 83 of them got massacred, basically.
They got massacred, but did they have that like deep level of faith where they said like, I will literally die like
They
70
literally
times?
could have just
Actually,
left the
yeah.
compound. They could have just left, right?
They could have just left. So okay. I mean, maybe they had some type of mental illness, or like, because you
Well,
can
no,
be
they were just
indoctrinated.
really convicted that their thing was correct.
Okay, but there was 83 of them, whereas with the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, he had like hundreds upon hundreds of men that he convinced in his message.
Okay, I mean, there's also the case of like, was it Jonestown, where like was his name John Jones? Anyway, some guy named Jones. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Jonestown next.
Okay.
People basically drank a bunch of Kool-Aid laced with cyanide because they thought they were going to the next life. Jim Jones, that's what it is.
Okay.
Like, this is
All
the thing
right.
that happens. People buy into these absurd things and are willing to die for things all the time.
Okay. So another thing that we believe in Islam is that each of the messengers came with signs. And so the sign of the Prophet Muhammad would be the Quran. I'm not sure if you've ever read the Quran.
I have not.
Have you? I have not. You have not? Okay. I would recommend reading it because, if you're an atheist, you're claiming that God does not exist. But, if there's 2 billion people that do believe that God exists, I think it's worth looking into why they believe God exists. And the main book that they base their beliefs off would be the Holy Quran. So there are certain signs within the Quran, proofs. For example, one of them would be the development of the fetus. It describes how the fetus grows in 3 stages.
But it gets
And
the order wrong.
Does it get the order wrong?
Uh-huh. It says that flesh grows around the bone, but that's just not how it happens.
Flesh grows around the bone.
That bone forms and then flesh wraps around it. But that's just not right. Oh, where'd he go? Oh, he left. Oof. Big oof. All right, let's talk to Chainless Servant.
Hey, what's up?
Howdy, how's it going?
I'm fine. What about yourself?
Doing okay. Which god do you believe in, and how are you going to convince me of it?
I believe in Allah. I'm Muslim, so yeah, there's that. And
Okay.
I would prove the existence of my God via some sort of transcendental argument.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and make it.
God is a necessary precondition for logic. Logic exists, so God exists.
Okay, why should I accept premise 1?
Yeah, I'll substantiate it. So, do you believe in logic? Do you accept or affirm logic?
I use it. I think it's a valuable tool to do rational discourse. I don't know what you mean by believe in it.
Yeah, maybe I didn't word it well. What I mean with it is that you affirm, for an example, the law of non-contradiction as a universal law.
When you say a universal law, like I think that it is a useful way of reasoning about the world. Sure. I don't know what you mean by universal law.
Okay. I'll just ask this. Do you believe that for an example, the law of non-contradiction was true before humanity existed?
I don't think that it existed before humanity existed. Unless there were like aliens that had minds as well. But like, disregarding that, yeah. I don't think that it existed before humanity existed.
Okay, sure. So that would entail that contradictions were possible before the humans existed, right?
It doesn't entail that, no. It entails that propositions didn't exist before humans existed.
Yeah, it's a concept, obviously.
Yeah. So I'm just referring to proposition, like the law of non-contradiction applies to propositions. If there are no propositions, then there are no contradictions.
Sure, but like the concept of it, was it true? Like, could contradictions
of what?
exist before humanity?
Well,
The concept of the law of
contradictions
non-contradiction.
Contradictions aren't things. Contradictions is a property of a pair of propositions, right? And if there are no propositions,
Exactly.
then there's no contradictions.
Well, not necessarily. So, for an example, a contradiction could be a planet both existing and not existing. Aside from whether there are
That's two
formulated
propositions. The planet exists. The planet doesn't
but-
exist. Those are the propositions. Those propositions wouldn't exist without people.
Aside of people like being able to articulate these propositions, it still wouldn't be possible, right? It still wouldn't be a thing.
What wouldn't be a thing?
This contradiction. For an example, a planet both
Contradictions
existing
are
and not
properties.
simultaneous.
A contradiction is a property of a pair of propositions. If there are no propositions, then there are no contradictions.
Okay, so you're saying that a contradiction couldn't occur before humans existed.
Contradictions, it's a category error. The concept of
How?
contradiction doesn't apply in a world without minds.
Wait, but that's like that's what we're arguing about, right?
Well, at least that's my position. Why should I not believe that?
Okay, so then you're still simply implying that contradictions couldn't happen or couldn't take place before humans existed, right?
It's a category error to try to talk about contradictions prior to humans, in my view.
How? Like, contradictions are
So maybe I
not
should be clear. I'm a nominalist.
Ah,
So
okay, yeah, that does make a bit more sense. Okay, maybe I should have asked that before. Okay, wait, let me think about it. Okay, then what if we, like, I don't know if you're willing to accept this like definition of contradiction, but like a contradiction would be like two opposing terms within the same substance.
you're gonna have to be specific. What do you mean by substance here? Are we talking about like substance in like the substrate theory form of substance, or like?
No,
What do you mean?
substance would be like a self-subsisting entity in this sense.
So when you say two opposing terms, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so for an example, two opposing terms would be a square circle existing, right? It's one substance, a square circle, that has two contradictory or two opposing terms. Square, like having sides, and circle having no sides.
So you're trying to define a contradiction as having as an object. Can you repeat how you're trying to define what a contradiction is?
Yeah, it would be somewhat of like a substance that has multiple opposing terms or multiple opposing properties.
I don't know. So when you say opposing, you just mean that they're like mutually contradictory, but then that kind of just makes the definition circular.
Well, not necessarily, right? So we as humans, we can articulate it in the form like we're talking about it right now, but opposing would simply be yeah, how do I wouldn't really know how to explain it to you.
I mean, like the way look, so my position is that like there is a state of affairs. The universe has a state of affairs. And you know, when there are minds around, you can actually like start like creating propositions about that state of affairs, like, you know, predicating attributes of that state of affairs and describing things, and you might come to a system of logic that is useful for describing that state of affairs. And I think that that state of affairs is like consistent in some sense, meaning that you're not going to have like if there's a thing there, then the thing is there. So in that sense, I think that there's like some sort of consistency built into the state of affairs of the universe. But I'm not sure I would call that like logical laws.
Okay, so for an example, you wouldn't say that the law of non-contradiction, simply the concept of it, would always have to be true.
Yeah, I just don't think the concept is like a thing that has like ontological status.
Yeah, no, concept
no
obviously. Yeah, sure. Concepts obviously don't have like ontological status, but that's why, for an example, in my worldview, I would say that this concept is like residing within the mind of God, right? So
I just don't think that you need the concept to exist in order for like a planet to just sit there and not like pop in and out of existence.
Why not?
Because the concept is descriptive, not prescriptive.
Yeah, sure, but how does that change anything, right? So, for an example, if contradictions can't exist, then, for an example, the law of non-contradiction, which is a concept, must reside within a mind, right?
Well, what I'm saying is that you don't need like some concept in order for it to be true that a planet just sits there.
Why not? Like,
Why
for
do you need why do you need a concept for there to be a state of affairs, a state of affairs about the way the world is?
yeah, I'm not saying you need it, but it simply is a concept, right? So, like the law of non-contradiction or contradictions not being able to take place, this is a concept. Like 1 + 1 equaling
Yeah,
2
and that
is also a
concept
concept.
that concept doesn't exist if there are no minds around, and the state of affairs keeps being the same state of affairs. Like if like let's like hypothetically suppose there's no God, and suppose that humanity has always existed, so that the laws of logic have always existed, conceptually. But then one day, humanity just blows themselves to smithereens. Okay, well, that doesn't mean that like the planet would suddenly start both existing and not existing. It's just there would just no longer be a concept of identity that exists anymore. But whether or not that concept is there, the planet's still just being a planet.
Yeah, but there's nowhere for this concept to reside in anymore. So the concept can be true.
I don't care whether the concept is true. The universe still has a state of affairs.
Yeah, exactly. But the state of affairs is based on this concept, right?
No, why would the state of affairs be like beholden to like some mind's conception of it?
Well, that's what we observe, right? We observe that contradictions can take place. And we observe that
Yeah.
the law of identity, for an example, is true.
Well, hold on. We observe that contradictions are never true, because again, contradictions are descriptive of propositions, right? Contradictions are not like events. They're not like things that happen or don't happen.
Okay, wait. Propositions are concepts, right? Propositions
Yeah.
don't. Okay, sure. And contradictions is like a contradiction is talking about something ontologically, right?
No. Well,
No.
it depends on whether you give like ontological status to propositions, right?
Yeah, sure. So wait, like a proposition is always a concept because it doesn't have any ontology, right?
Yeah, that I agree. Well, like some people ascribe like ontology to like concepts, if you're like a weird Platonist, I guess. But yeah, sure.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're not Platonists. Okay, nevertheless, so okay, these concepts. So propositions are concepts, and for an example, wait, what was I about to say? I just lost myself. Oh yeah, so if these concepts, they aren't like, even though this law of logic, for an example. Oh wait, I was about to say this. Like a contradiction, it is talking about something that's happening within like the ontological world. So it cannot be just something like based on two propositions.
How is a
because
contradiction talking about something in the ontological world? A
yeah,
contradiction
for an
is
example.
like a contradiction is P and not P.
Exactly, yes.
So
P would
that's a statement about propositions.
Yeah, like it's formulated in propositions, but it's talking about the ontological world, right? So for an example,
what does that mean?
Okay, so P, Dr. Blitz exists, and not P, Dr. Blitz doesn't exist. This is a contradiction, right? This contradiction, these propositions, they exist conceptually, but these propositions are talking about something that is happening ontologically, right? Exist.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but then these contradictions are still talking about something that's happening ontologically, right?
The contradiction is about the proposition, and the propositions is about some ontological thing.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that that contradictions are properties of ontological things, right?
No, it can't be a property of something ontological.
Well, the point is like my point is a contradiction has a truth value, and if you accept the law of non-contradiction, you assume that the truth value of the contradiction is always false. Now, ontological objects don't have truth values. Their truth values cannot be evaluated because they don't have them. It's a category error. So to talk about contradictions in ontological things and like plants, it's a category error. It's just a mistake.
Yeah, sure, but like these things, for an example, this contradiction is simply perceived by our minds, right? It's articulated by propositions and it's perceived by our minds.
Yeah, our minds perceive the propositions.
Okay, so if we would assume that a plant cannot exist and not exist before humans existed, then that would have to require a mind to formulate this concept, right? Like the law of non-contradiction.
Well, we can formulate it now. We can imagine, because we can form these concepts now. We can imagine, or we can conceptualize the two propositions. Let's say P is the plant existed a billion years ago, and not P is the plant did not exist a billion years ago. And then we could be like, aha, the conjunction of those two propositions must be false. And that refers to things before humans existed. But that doesn't mean that the propositions existed before humans existed.
Okay, sure. By the way, this is off topic and then I'll drop down. I wouldn't really know how to defend it anymore, but like, do you believe like an infinite regress is possible?
Yeah, I don't see why it's not.
Okay, sure. I was just wondering. Okay, bye-bye.
You're good. Take care. He was the least annoying tag guy I've ever met, and I appreciate that. Wow, I'm really losing my voice. You can tell because I have morning voice and it's 11 p.m. Actually, you know what? It's 11 p.m., so I should probably just end the live. Y'all, it is 11 p.m., so I'm going to end the live here. Thank you guys for being here, and I'll try to be live again tomorrow. Around the same time. We might use a different topic, we might change, but who knows. Yeah, so if you haven't already and you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe on YouTube. And if you're watching on TikTok, make sure to follow along. In either case, go find the link to my Discord. On YouTube, it's in the description. On TikTok, there'll be a link in the link tree in my bio. Go join the Discord, and there's some lovely people there. You can have some lively debates and even wilder conversations in the live channel. So I'll see you guys then, perhaps tomorrow around the same time. And until then, take care of yourself.